Chapter 1159. The three imperial cities were in turmoil. Carriages rumbled in front of the 13th prince's palace as forces from all over the world continued to arrive. The battle for the throne had been cruel for generations. However, the reward after the risk still made countless people scramble for it. The great inheritances that had missed the tripartite situation of the past finally seized the opportunity to provide timely assistance, hoping to gain a foothold in the battle for the throne in the future. The 13th prince's palace opened its doors and welcomed everyone. Groups of guests came in and out, looking forward to it and returning with satisfaction. Inside the palace, Inji, who had witnessed the arrival of various forces, could not hide the shock in her eyes. Although she was mentally prepared, the truth was still hard to believe. In just one day, more than 10 forces had arrived and expressed their willingness to pledge their loyalty. How is it? Is there anything wrong with what this prince said? As the sun was setting, the last group of guests left. Ningchen stood up and looked out of the palace and said calmly, "There is a famous saying in my hometown, when a man achieves the Tao, even his chickens and dogs will ascend to heaven. Today, all the forces that have come are looking forward to me inheriting the throne in the future. At that time, their timely assistance will become their chance to soar." Inji was silent. She had come to the Sea Ghost prison with the same purpose. Although the 13th prince was the weakest among the three princes, in terms of background and potential, he was definitely not inferior to the other two princes. Once he succeeded in inheriting the throne in the future, the benefits that the Ghost clan would receive would be limitless. Inji. Ningchen turned around and looked at the cold and charming woman in front of him. He smiled and said, "Sooner or later, you will know how wise your choice is today." Primeval Demon Domain, Western Battlefield, in front of the Heavenly Demon Camp. Xianzhen looked gloomy as he read the secret reports sent from the three imperial cities. The 13th prince had indeed come to this day. Allowing the tiger to return to the mountain would eventually become a big problem. Behind him, 10th Princess Xianyu walked over and said calmly, "First brother, you don't seem too happy. Is it because of 13th brother? 10th sister, you think too much." Xianzhen calmed himself down and said, 13th brother has done well in the peace talks, so it's only natural for him to be given the 9-king pearl. As his elder brother, I'm happy for him." Xianyu smiled and looked in the direction of the sanctuary's army. She said, "Eldest brother, what we should be thinking about now is how to deal with the sanctuary's attack. As for the imperial city, there are 3 demon emperors guarding it. There is no need for us to worry." When Xianzhen heard what Suemo had said, a cold light flashed across his eyes. His 13th brother receiving the 9-king pearl was such a joyous occasion. As his elder brother, he should express his gratitude. In the northern continent, snowflakes drifted down. Winter had arrived, and the entire northern continent was covered in snow. Everywhere was white. In the sorcerer race's holy land, on the ancient central altar, which Tian Exen stood quietly, gazing into the distance, divining the secrets of the heavens day and night. The 13th prince's request for peace was not part of her original plan. What she did not expect was that her master would actually agree. The Stone Tribe had suffered a crushing defeat when the 5 royal families joined forces to kill the demons. It would be difficult for them to pose a threat to the southeast region in a short period of time. If the sorcerer tribe continued to retreat, the situation of killing the demons would be quickly defeated. Although the western sanctuary still had the upper hand, it was still lacking compared to the heavenly demon imperial tribe. After a few days of divining, it was difficult to discern the secrets of the heavens. Tian Exen retracted her gaze and looked back at the holy palace behind her. Exhaustion flashed across her beautiful face. "Master, what are you and the 13th prince planning?" In the sorcerer race's holy palace, a haggard old woman stood quietly in the palace. Her body, which was already nearing the end of her life, was now even more withered. In front of Emperor Go, the heavenly demon martial arts was perfect. No one could see any flaws in the 9 heavenly demon transformations. After countless years of inheritance, the secret technique of the demon imperial tribe was perfected day by day. Even the emperor of the sorcerer race, who was an emperor, could not find any flaws in it. Emperor Go's face was getting older by the day. Using the secret technique of the sorcerer race to divining the secrets of the heavens was against the laws of the heavens. For half a month, Emperor Go did not step out of the holy palace. She knew very well that the longer she delayed, the higher the chances of the 5 imperial tribes failing. At the same time, in the 3 imperial city, in front of the 13th prince's palace. Every day, there was an endless stream of people coming to visit the palace. The gates of the palace were wide open, and no matter how big or small the faction, they were all welcomed. In just a few days, the 13th prince's faction, which was originally lacking in foundation, grew rapidly. The 2 demon emperors chose to turn a blind eye to the 13th prince's blatant attempt to form a faction. This caused some of the factions who were watching to see some clues and choose to side with the 13th prince. In the 3rd prince's palace, Xian Qin quietly listened to the report from the 4 profound entrances. There was no trace of a smile on his cold face. From the attitude of the 2 demon emperors, it was obvious that they wanted to support the 13th prince to fight against him. However, were they not worried that they would be unable to control the 13th prince in the future? In the 13th prince's palace, Ning Chen and Yinji sat opposite each other. Despite the changes in the imperial city, the palace was still peaceful. "Your Highness, are you not worried at all?" With the black chess piece in hand, Yinji, who had made the first move, was hesitant. She couldn't see the overall situation clearly. What's there to be worried about? Isn't the current situation very clear? Ning Chen made the first move, and the situation gradually became clear. Just like the imperial city and the world, no matter how the situation on the chessboard changed, the one who made the first move would always be the one who made the first move. Seeing the 13th prince's calm expression, Yinji's hesitation lessened. She placed the black chess piece in her hand aggressively. At this moment, demonic chi surged outside the palace. A familiar figure appeared, surrounded by demonic chi and carrying a long wooden box on his back. It was very eye-catching. Xian Luo reappeared. His left hand returned, and the long wooden box on his back flew into the palace. "Your Highness, this is the 1st prince's gift. Whether you dare to accept it or not will depend on your courage." Xian Luo looked at the plain-clothed young man in the palace and said coldly, "In this world, there is no gift that I don't dare to accept." Inside the palace, Ning Chen faintly replied. He immediately placed the chess piece and stood up. Inside the palace, the long wooden box was inserted into the ground. Demonic chi surged and a terrifying aura loomed. Ning Chen walked forward and pressed his right hand on the wooden box. He exerted force, and the wooden box shattered. Amidst the flying wood chips, a black demonic sword appeared. A terrifying demonic aura surged and spread rapidly. "This sword is Mo Yuan. I heard that your Highness is good at swords, so the 1st prince specially sent this item. However, whether your Highness is fated with this sword or not will depend on your strength." Xian Luo sneered. The members of the royal family looked in the direction of the 13th prince's residence with solemn expressions. The 2 crown princes were finally going to officially confront each other. Who would be the stronger one? The 1st prince had entered the king realm for a long time, and his cultivation was unfathomable. Even in the entire Sky Devil imperial family, he was an absolute powerhouse. In comparison, the 13th prince had only cultivated for a short period of time. Even though he had temporarily reached the king realm with the help of the 9 king pearl, there was still a big gap between him and the 1st prince. However, nothing was absolute. Judging from how the 13th prince had withstood the 4th prince's attack that day, the 13th prince's strength could not be measured by common sense. In the 13th prince's palace, Ning Chen raised his hand and held the demonic sword. The moment he touched it, the demonic chi on the demonic sword exploded wildly. Cracks appeared on the sword and quickly spread. In the next moment, a shocking scene occurred. The Mo Yuan demonic sword shattered, and a terrifying impact spread out, devouring everything around it. Chapter 1160. Inside the 13th prince's residence, knowing Ming took the sword. Xianzhen's power exploded and the demonic sword exploded. The violent impact spread out rapidly. The entire Third Imperial City could feel the huge power from the Crown Prince's residence. Heaven and earth shook violently. Inside the Imperial City, all the experts stared at the 13th Prince's residence seriously. The battle between the two princes would determine the future of the tripartite balance of power. It was very important who would win and who would lose. In the ancestral land of the heavenly demons, the two demon emperors stood in the demonic fog and watched the situation in the Third Imperial City. They had supported the disciple of Jiuyo so that he could restrain Xianqing. However, they didn't want this chess piece to be too powerful and lose control. Inside the 13th Prince's residence, demonic qi surged out like waves and swallowed the silhouette in front of it. However, at this moment, a sword radiance shot out from the demonic qi. The sword radiance was extremely sharp and it cut through the demonic qi and dissipated the impact. Ningchen walked out from the dissipating demonic qi. He looked at Xian Luo outside the mansion and said indifferently, "Go back and tell the Crown Prince that I have accepted his gift." In front of the gate, Xian Luo's eyes narrowed slightly. He nodded slightly and said, "I will pass on your message." Xian Luo didn't stay any longer. He turned around and disappeared into the void. All the forces in the Imperial City recovered from the shock. They couldn't hide the shock in their hearts. Had the 13th Prince become so powerful? The Crown Prince's cultivation was at least above the late King realm. The 13th Prince withstood the demonic sword, which was equivalent to withstanding the Crown Prince's full power attack. Such strength was really shocking. The 13th Prince was born in the human race and had only cultivated for a little more than 100 years. It was terrifying that he could fight against the Crown Prince who was at the late King realm in such a short time. Everyone retracted their gazes. The 13th Prince's strength was beyond their imagination. They had to seriously think about their future plans. In the 13th Prince's residence, the door that had been open all this time suddenly closed. Inside the residence, Ningchen stopped walking. Suddenly, he vomited a mouthful of blood, dyeing the ground in front of him red. "Your Highness." Seeing this, Yinji's expression changed slightly. She went up to help Ningchen and asked with concern, "Are you okay?" "I'm fine." Ningchen steadied himself and raised his hand to wipe off the blood at the corner of his mouth. Demonic qi surged around him, suppressing his injuries. In the deepest part of the heavenly devil ancestral land, the 7 luminaries Devil Emperor and the 8 Desolation Devil Emperor withdrew their consciousness and relaxed. 13th brother, not bad. He knew that he had to hide his injuries in front of the other forces. Only with such wisdom could he fight against Xianqing. However, their strength was still lacking by half a notch. This was also what they wanted to see. In the 13th Prince's palace, the demonic aura around Ningchen dissipated, and the corners of his mouth curled up slightly. "Is this the result you want to see?" "Yinji." Ningchen stood up, looked at the woman beside him, and said, "I need my own force." Yinji narrowed her eyes and said, "My ghost race will definitely do our best to serve your highness." Ningchen looked at the former seriously and said again, "What I'm saying is that I need my own force. Do you understand?" Yinji was startled when she heard this. Then, her body shook and her expression changed. She didn't dare to answer the 13th Prince's question. "Go back and carefully consider my words. I will wait here for the Yinsi Ghost Prison's decision." Ningchen said calmly. "Yes." Yinji bowed respectfully and waved her hand to summon the ghost chariot. Then, she drove the chariot to the north. Seeing Yinji leave, Ningchen turned around and entered the palace. After a while, a strange light rose around the palace. The divine seal was activated, isolating the palace from the heavens. In the next moment, golden light shone in the palace and an old figure appeared. It had only been a year since they last met, but the emperor in front of him seemed to have aged 100 years. Junior Ningchen greets Senior Go Huang. Looking at the emperor in front of him who was rapidly aging, Ningchen sighed and bowed respectfully. "After a year, your highness's strength has become stronger." Go Huang's old face revealed a smile as he said, "The situation has changed. I don't dare to stop." Ningchen said softly, "I'll have to trouble your highness here in the demonic area. The demonic 9 transformations is complicated and profound. I will need some time to solve it." Go Huang said emotionally. Senior Go Huang, don't worry. I will do my best to buy time for you. Ning Chen said seriously. Thank you, Your Highness. Go Huang said with a hint of tiredness in his voice. Also, the demonic war god Azura has appeared. He is a great threat to the 5 royal families. Can Your Highness restrain him? Azura? Ning Chen frowned slightly. After a while, he nodded and said, Is 3 months enough? Enough. Go Huang nodded and said no more. His body faded away and disappeared. After the emperor of the sorcerer tribe left, Ning Chen thought for a while and waved his hand to disperse the divine seal around the palace. Then he turned around and left the palace. 3 months was not a long time. He hoped that these 3 months of waiting could completely turn the situation around. In the 3 royal city, after Ning Chen left his residence, he went straight to the 9th prince's residence. Since he returned to the city, he had not visited the 9th prince's residence. Now it was time to go. However, the 9th prince did not seem to welcome his former ally. The 9th prince was not a mediocre person. Because of his identity and bloodline, he had always been below the 3 princes. The 7th prince died in the Dragon Emperor Mountain. The 1st prince and the 3rd prince were both injured. When the 9th prince saw hope, his allies stood in his way. One could imagine how angry Xian Ke was. In front of the 9th prince's residence, Ning Chen stopped and looked at the beautiful palace. The Black Crown Prince token appeared in his hand. Greetings, Your Highness. In front of the residence, 2 guards immediately knelt down and saluted. Tell him that I am here to visit. Ning Chen said calmly. Yes. One of the guards took the order and quickly went back to report. Ning Chen stood in front of the residence and waited patiently. Not long after, the guard who went to report came back and saluted respectfully. Your Highness, the 9th prince invites you. Ning Chen nodded and walked into the residence. The 9th prince's residence was visited again. The atmosphere in the residence was completely different from the previous time. In the palace, Xian Ke sat on the main seat with a cold expression. Seeing the person who came, Xian Ke's expression became even colder. If he still couldn't see that he was being used, he would be a fool. Since he formed an alliance with the 13th prince, everything seemed to be going according to their plan. But in reality, he didn't get any benefits from it. Now that the 13th prince had received the 9th king pearl, his status had changed. As an ally, he had become a laughingstock. Ning Chen entered the palace and looked at the gloomy 9th prince. He smiled and said, 9th brother, you don't seem to be in a good mood. Xian Ke stood up and said coldly, Congratulations, 13th brother. You got what you wanted. Ning Chen smiled and said, What if I swear right here and now that I will never inherit the imperial family's legacy? Hearing this, Xian Ke's body shook and his face was filled with disbelief. What was the 13th prince saying? Was he crazy? Ning Chen chuckled. He raised his right hand and said, I, Ning Chen, the 13th prince of the Sky Devil imperial family, swear that I will never inherit the imperial family in this life. If I violate this oath, I am willing to be struck by lightning. When the oath was made, the heavens and earth witnessed it. The invisible power of laws flowed and the oath was engraved. Hearing the oath, Xian Ke recovered from his shock. He looked at the 13th prince and said in confusion, 13th brother, do you know what you have done? I know very well. Ning Chen said seriously, 9th brother, I know you have misunderstood me, so I came to clarify. As for this oath, if it can dispel your doubts about me, it is worth it. Xian Ke looked at the 13th prince. For the first time, he couldn't understand the person in front of him. The throne was something many people dreamed of, but the 13th prince didn't care about it. 9th royal brother, everyone has their own ambitions. I'm not interested in the royal family's legacy. This time, I received the 9 king pearl unexpectedly. I'm deeply sorry for causing you to misunderstand. Ning Chen cupped his fists and apologized. Seeing this, Xian Ke immediately went up and helped the 13th prince up. He said with shame, I should be the one apologizing. I was narrow-minded and misunderstood you. Ning Chen stood up and said with a smile, 9th brother, it doesn't matter who was right or wrong in the past. Since the misunderstanding has been resolved, I have something to discuss with you. 13th brother, please sit down and talk. Xian Ke led the 13th prince to the guest seat and said gently, 13th brother, what do you want to talk about? It is about my race's war god, Azura. Ning Chen said seriously, if I am not wrong, Azura should have been awakened by you. Xian Ke was silent and didn't deny it. In the previous situation, the third prince was confined by the two demon emperors. If he wasn't released, the third prince's forces would gradually collapse. At that time, the first prince wouldn't have to do anything. Therefore, ninth brother didn't do anything wrong by awakening Azura. Ning Chen calmly analyzed, however, imperial brother should also know that the crown prince is currently far away in the western battlefield and can't rush back in time. Without the crown prince restraining him, not only will the third prince's strength recover quickly, it might even be stronger than before. I think the two demon emperors gave me the 9 king pearl so that I can restrain the third prince as much as possible while the crown prince is away. Xian Ke nodded and said, I have also thought about this. In the current situation, 13th brother must be careful. For the sake of the imperial power, the third prince may attack you while you are still young. Ninth brother, don't worry. As long as I don't leave the imperial city, the third prince won't have the guts. After all, he doesn't want to completely anger the two demon emperors. Ning Chen said seriously, compared to the third prince, I am more concerned about Azura's attitude. Ninth brother, do you know if the war god of my race will interfere in the battle for the imperial power? Probably not. Xian Ke shook his head and said, Azura was ordered by Demon Emperor Kun to save the third prince and then returned to the demon source Death Realm. I think the two demon emperors will probably send Azura to the battlefield. It will not only cut off the third prince's support, but also turn the situation around. Hearing this, Ning Chen's expression turned serious. He shook his head and said in a deep voice, absolutely not. Chapter 1161. In the ninth prince's residence, the two were discussing the heavenly demon clan's god of war. The atmosphere immediately became heavy. Xian Ke frowned and said, what's wrong? Azura leaving the demon source Death Realm should be a good thing for 13th brother. After all, this god of war is too big of a threat. If he stays, even the two demon emperors will have to be careful. They have no choice but to give the third prince a way out. If Azura stays, it will indeed hinder me from defeating the third prince. However, compared to the consequences of him leaving, this influence can be completely ignored. Ning Chen said in a low voice, ninth brother, you also know that the western battlefield is the only battlefield where our heavenly demon imperial family is at a disadvantage. Therefore, if Azura leaves, he will definitely go to the western battlefield to help. When he spoke up to this point, Ning Chen paused for a moment before he looked towards the west and said, ninth imperial brother, you should know better than anyone else who is overseeing the western battlefield, right? The Dragon Clan and Xianzhen. Xian Ke's expression changed slightly as he replied. Ning Chen nodded and said seriously, therefore, no matter what, Azura must not leave. Otherwise, once the western battlefield is over and Xianzhen returns, the situation in the imperial city will change again. At that time, how can we fight against a crown prince who has the support of two demon emperors and has outstanding military achievements? Xian Ke's expression became heavy after hearing this. He was too careless. He only cared about the situation in the imperial city and forgot that there was still a crown prince on the battlefield. In the current situation, the crown prince could not return to the imperial city. At least, he could not return with a body full of military achievements. In this case, Azura really could not leave. Looking at Xian Ke's thoughtful gaze, Ning Chen said seriously, the situation in the imperial city is unpredictable. Before this, we did need the crown prince to restrain Xian Qing. However, in the current situation, the crown prince will either not return or come back with a thunderous force to eliminate all obstacles. This is not the result we want. Xian Ke nodded and said seriously, what can I do for 13th brother? Use Xian Qing to restrain Azura. Ning Chen said solemnly, the third crown prince is indebted to the ninth imperial brother. The third crown prince can still listen to his imperial brother's words. As long as the third crown prince can see the current situation clearly, He will definitely think of a way to make Azura stay. I understand. Xian Ke nodded and agreed. After the discussion, Ning Chen stood up and looked at the ninth prince in front of him. He said, I can't stay in Royal Brother's residence for too long to avoid arousing suspicion. I'll leave the rest to Royal Brother. Rest assured. Xian Ke also stood up and replied, I will make a trip to Xianqing's place. Royal Brother is now caught in the whirlpool of the struggle for imperial power. You have to be careful. Thank you for your reminder, brother. I will. Ning Chen replied and didn't say anything else. He turned around and walked out of the palace. 13th brother. Xian Ke suddenly called out from behind. Ning Chen stopped, turned around, and asked with a puzzled expression, 9th imperial brother, is there anything else? I'd like to know why you're not interested in imperial power at all. Xian Ke spoke of the question that had been suppressed in his heart for a long time, and he asked with a serious expression. Ning Chen smiled and said, in life, there are too many things that are more meaningful than imperial power. I'm not willing to give up the precious things around me for it. For example, the hard-won feelings of kinship in front of me. Hearing this, Xian Ke was silent for a moment. Then he bowed seriously and said, I apologize again for my distrust of 13th brother. It's all in the past. Ning Chen smiled and didn't say anything else. He turned around and left. In the palace, Xian Ke looked at the back of Ning Chen's leaving figure. His expression became serious. His 13th brother's vow to give up imperial power was beyond his expectation. An vow was the most terrifying restriction for any cultivator, especially for the heavenly demons who weren't recognized by the heavens and earth. If his 13th brother really did what he said today, then in the future, when he, Xian Ke, ascended the throne, his 13th brother would be the most important official of the heavenly demon royal family. In the imperial city, Ning Chen walked on the street and looked at the dark clouds in the sky. A cold smile flashed across his face. The bloodless war had begun again. It was a pity that warriors couldn't die on the battlefield. No matter when, schemes were the most difficult to guard against. Dying under them would be a lifelong regret. However, this was a part of war. It was as terrifying as the battlefield. There was the possibility of dying at any time. On the street, the Imperial Guards were patrolling. Since the chaos in the Imperial City a long time ago, the security in the Imperial City had been strengthened. Imperial Guards could be seen everywhere. At the front of the Imperial Guards, a middle-aged man in heavy armor looked over. The two looked at each other and stopped. Brother Xian, Ning Chen bowed as usual and greeted. You flatter me. Xian sighed and said, 13th prince is now the real crown prince. I can't accept you calling me brother. The current situation isn't what I want. Ning Chen sighed with emotion and said, in the Imperial City, we will face different dangers at all times. At this point, I no longer have any other choice. Xian was silent. After a long while, she said, I understand. From now on, Your Highness's path will be more and more difficult. Your Highness, take care of yourself. After saying that, Xian continued to walk forward. The two of them brushed past each other, their backs facing each other as they walked off into the distance. It was like the portrayal of life. From today onwards, the two of them would walk opposite paths, and it would be difficult for them to walk together again. Just as Ning Chen returned to his residence, Xian Ke walked out of the 9th prince's residence and headed towards the 3rd prince's residence. In the 3rd prince's residence, Xianqing sat on the throne and listened to the secret reports from the 4 entrances. His expression was unusually cold. The saying, tea cools down when people are gone, was vividly reflected on some people. He had just been grounded for a few months, and those people who used to bootlick him had already found another master. Moreover, the 13th prince was really unrestrained. He clearly knew that these people had no loyalty, but he still accepted them all. It seemed that the 13th prince couldn't wait to strengthen himself after obtaining the 9 king pearl. Crown Prince, the 9th prince is outside and wants to see you. At this moment, a guard walked over quickly from the front of the king's hall and spoke respectfully. Invite him in. Xianqing narrowed his eyes and said, Yes. The guard accepted the order and left. The ninth prince. In the palace, the head of the four entrances, Dong Xian Yu Ting, frowned and said, "Isn't this person on the 13th prince's side?" "Times have changed," Xian Qing said lightly. "In the past, the 13th prince didn't have the qualifications to inherit the throne and the 9th prince was on equal terms with him. Now that the 13th prince has the 9 king pearl, the 9th prince can't be on equal terms with the 13th prince anymore. It's normal for his mentality to change. From the way the 9th prince went to the demonic source death realm to invite Azure out, my 9th prince isn't as ordinary as he seems. He knew to leave a backup plan for himself and did it. This is why I'm not surprised that he's here." Not long after Xian Qing finished speaking, a young figure walked in front of the palace. His face was slightly gloomy and people didn't want to get close to him. "Greetings, third brother." Xian Ke bowed and said respectfully, "Ninth brother, there's no need to be so polite." Xian Qing personally came out of the palace and greeted him with a smile. "Ninth brother, how come you have time to come to my palace today?" "After third brother regained his freedom, I've always wanted to come and congratulate you, but I couldn't leave. Today, I had the chance to come and visit third brother," Xian Ke said. "We're brothers." "Ninth brother, you don't have to be so polite." Xian Qing smiled and said, "It's cold outside. Let's talk inside." "Okay." Xian Ke nodded and walked into the palace. Inside the palace, the four entrances bowed to the two and left quietly. They didn't want to disturb their conversation. Looking at the four people leaving, Xian Ke's eyes flashed and he said uncertainly, "They're from the four mysterious royal family?" "Ninth brother, you have good eyes." Xian Qing smiled and said, "They're the current entrances of the four mysterious royal family. Dongxian Yu Ting, Xishuan Yu Feng, Nanxian Yang Yi and Beixian Yaoshua." Hearing this, Xian Ke was surprised and said, "Brother, I'm surprised that you've taken them in as your subordinates. The Beixian royal family is my mother's family. As for the other three families, they have always been on good terms with the Beixian royal family. The four mysterious royal families are bound together. I have to thank my mother for being able to get their loyalty," Xian Qing said with a smile. Xian Ke sighed. The biggest difference between him and Xian Qing and Xian Zhen was their birth. The Sky Demonic royal family cared about their bloodline the most. This was also the reason why the 13th prince couldn't get the 9 king pearl. However, with the 13th prince as a precedent, not only him, but the other princes also had a glimmer of hope. "Ninth brother, how is the 13th brother?" Xian Qing suddenly asked. When Xian Ke heard this, he was first startled, and then his expression became somewhat unsightly. Gu Zuian said, "I'm not too sure about 13th brother's matter. Third brother, you're more well-informed than I am. I'm here to ask about the battle situation at the front line. What's the current situation?" "It's not good." Seeing that Gu Zui didn't want to talk about the 13th prince, Xian Qing didn't force him. He replied honestly, "Although the sorcerer tribe has retreated temporarily, the other forces are still tense, especially the Western Holy Region. Their strength is beyond imagination. The 6 palace masters of the Holy Region are all in the advanced stage of the King Realm. They are very powerful and difficult to deal with." Xian Ke frowned and said, "Didn't the Dragon Tribe also go to the Western battlefield?" "The palace masters of the 3rd and 6th palaces of the Holy Region are not weaker than the Dragon Tribe. Even if the Dragon Tribe joins in, the situation won't change much," Xian Qing replied. Xian Ke frowned again and thought for a moment. He said, "It seems that only the war god of our tribe can turn the situation around." "Azura?" Xian Qing looked at the demon source death land in the distance and said, "If Azura joins in, the result will be different." At that time, Xian Qing's expression suddenly changed. He was too careless. All this time, he had been focusing on the 13th prince and neglected the crown prince in the western battlefield. Xianzhen couldn't come back now. However, if the war in the western battlefield was over and Xianzhen returned with all his achievements, no one could stop him. Chapter 1162. The demon source death realm was filled with black mist. No one had dared to enter it for thousands of years. In the death realm, a man in black armor sat cross-legged. Black chi surrounded him and a powerful aura rose. The war god of the demon race, a peerless expert who was famous in the ancient times, had awakened again after hundreds of thousands of years. Outside the realm of death, a white-clothed figure walked over. His once gentle face was now abnormally cold. Without his disguise, he revealed the indifference of the demon race. Xianqing greets the war god of the demon race. Xianqing stopped in front of the death realm and bowed respectfully. In the depths of the death realm, Azura opened his eyes and looked at the young man in white. He said calmly, "What's the matter?" Xianqing invites the war god of the demon race to the Crown Prince Palace to express my gratitude. Xianqing stood up and said. Azura squinted his eyes and saw what Xianqing was thinking. He rejected him directly. "No need. I saved you because I am indebted to the first demon emperor of the demon race. However, the favor will run out eventually. If you want me to help you fight for the throne, you don't have to ask." Xianqing's eyes flashed coldly when he heard that. He smiled and said, "Xianqing will remember what the war god said. The war god of the demon race should not get involved in the fight for the throne. Is there anything else? If not, you can leave." Azura spoke in an indifferent tone within the black fog that filled the air. "One last thing." Xianqing's face sank. Demonic chi surged in his hand and a black demon emperor token appeared. Instantly, the surrounding area started to shake. "In the name of the first demon emperor of the demon race, I order Azura not to leave the demon source death realm for 3 months." Xianqing said solemnly. Azura frowned when he saw the token in Xianqing's hand. After a while, his expression returned to normal and he said calmly, "Yes, Your Majesty." Xianqing waved his hand and took back the demon emperor token. He looked at the war god of the demon race in the depths of the death realm. 3 months was the limit. He couldn't keep Azura here for too long with just the demon emperor token. During these 3 months, he had to strengthen his faction as quickly as possible. Only then would he be able to contend against Xianzhen when he returned. Since he had achieved his goal, Xianqing did not waste any more time and turned around to leave. In the depths of the realm of death, the Azura closed his eyes. The black gas around him converged, sealing off all of his aura. In the ancestral land of the celestial fiend, the 2 demon emperors stood amidst boundless demonic energy. In front of them, a messenger was seriously reporting the situation of the various battlefields as usual. On the eastern battlefield, the 3rd prince of the demon race, Prince Xianlai, who was known as the #1 palm in the world, was in command. The 4 divine generals of the divine capital mountain were unable to take it down for a long time. After several months of stalemate, the 5th divine general left the divine capital mountain and went to the front battlefield. Even the powerful Xianlai felt pressured when the 5 great godly generals joined forces. He retreated 300 miles to avoid them. In the southeast, after the defeat of the Stone Clan, their army retreated from the primordial devil domain and temporarily ceased all activities. However, faced with the Stone Clan that could attack again at any time, Xuanqi would not be able to return in a short period of time. On the southern battlefield, the heavenly demon 6th prince was holding off the 4 kings of the scaled tribe by himself. Although the situation was tense, he could still manage. The most difficult battlefield was the western battlefield. The armies of the sacred region and the demon race had clashed several times. The situation was heavily tilted. The strength of the 6 palace masters of the sacred region was shocking. Although the heavenly demon army had Xianzhen and Long Zhong, 2 powerful experts, they still could not turn the tide. In the deepest part of the heavenly demon ancestral land, the 7 luminaries demon emperors and the 8 desolation demon emperors listened to the messenger's report. Their expressions turned colder. The divine capital mountain and the western sacred region had become a huge threat. "It's time for the Azura to make a move," the 8 desolation demon emperor said in a deep voice. The 7 luminaries demon emperor nodded. He closed his eyes and unleashed his divine sense. In the realm of death, the 7 luminaries demon emperor's consciousness descended. His illusionary figure walked in the realm of death in search of the demon race's war god. In the depths of the realm of death, a black aura surged and sealed the war god's senses. Soon, the 7 luminaries demon emperor's clone arrived. He frowned slightly when he saw the war god in front of him. With his senses sealed, the Azura had gone into seclusion. In the depths of the heavenly demon ancestral land, the 7 luminaries demon emperor opened his eyes and said with a grave expression, "The Azura has sealed his senses. He won't be coming out of seclusion anytime soon." The 8 desolation demon emperor's expression turned stern. It was too much of a coincidence for the Azura to go into seclusion at this time. "The Azura can't make a move. We have to think of another way," the 7 luminaries demon emperor said. "Let Gandharv go," the 8 desolation demon emperor suggested. "No way." The 7 luminaries demon emperor shook his head and said, "Someone must keep an eye on the 13th brother. Gandharv can't leave yet. Yaksha, Janara, and Maharaga can't wake up for now. He's the only one left," the 8 desolation demon emperor said with a grave expression. "Garuda." The 7 luminaries demon emperor frowned. He did not want to use the man if possible. Garuda's strength was only second to the Tianzhong and the Azura among the group of 8. However, Garuda was born rebellious and difficult to control. The current situation did not allow for any mistakes. Even the 7 luminaries demon emperor could not guarantee the consequences of using Garuda. A double-edged sword could hurt others if used well, but it could hurt oneself if used poorly. Garuda is indeed difficult to control, but the situation on the battlefield is tense. "We can't afford to waste any more time," the 8 desolation demon emperor said seriously. The 7 luminaries demon emperor nodded. He had no choice but to take the risk. "Pass down my order. Wake Garuda up at once and ask him to leave as soon as possible to support the western battlefield." A black badge appeared in the 7 luminaries demon emperor's hand and flew toward the messenger. "Understood." The messenger accepted the order. He took the demon emperor badge and left. Half a day later, a demonic aura surged on the distant sky-reaching peak to the north of the sky demon ancestral land. The messenger showed up with the demon emperor badge in his hand. He said in a deep voice, "The demon emperor has ordered Garuda to leave immediately to support the western battlefield." The demon emperor badge flew into the air as soon as he finished the sentence. It shone brightly with a boundless royal aura. The next moment, countless runes appeared on the sky-reaching peak. Demonic light sprinkled down, and the seals quickly crumbled and vanished. Bang! At this moment, the wind and clouds in the 9 heavens changed. Strong winds swept across the place, and wild waves surged. The shocking rare phenomenon indicated how terrifying the person who would appear in the future was. On the sky-reaching peak, the messenger looked down at the mountain that was shaking violently with a stern expression. He stepped off the ground and retreated 1,000 zhang away. "He, the 7 luminaries demon emperor is finally willing to let me out?" An eerie and arrogant voice came from the mountain amid the strange phenomenon. It echoed throughout the sky-reaching peak. Bang! Another shocking tremor took place. The mountain cracked as a humanoid figure with a pair of wings slowly rose into the air. The wings flapped, and a strong gust of wind blew across 1,000 li. A strong gust of wind swept across the place. The messenger was immediately knocked a few steps back. He barely managed to stabilize himself. "Garuda, since you've woken up, do as you're told." The messenger suppressed the astonishment in his heart and said to the figure in front of him. Garuda sneered. He flapped his wings and immediately dashed forward. The distance of 1,000 zhang felt like it was just a short distance at that moment. Garuda was already in front of the messenger before he could react. "You don't have the right to say what I want to do." Garuda reached out and grabbed the messenger's throat as he said coldly, "Garuda, how dare you?" The messenger was horrified and shouted angrily. Garuda tightened his right hand. The messenger's face immediately turned red, and he found it difficult to breathe. "You're just a messenger. How dare you show off in front of me? Where did you get the guts?" Garuda said coldly. He did not hide the murderous intent in his eyes at all. His right hand tightened, and he kept eating away at the messenger's life. At this moment, demonic clouds surged in the sky and gathered from all directions. A moment later, the demonic clouds took shape. A terrifying figure that could shake the 9 heavens and 10 earths appeared. He pressed his right hand down, and a terrifying demonic aura pressed down on the person who was born rebellious. On the sky-reaching peak, Garuda sensed the danger from the sky. He threw the messenger away without hesitation. Then, he flashed and retreated 100 li boom. The terrifying demonic aura pressed down from the sky, and the entire sky-reaching peak collapsed. Huge rocks flew and fell like rain. Garuda, you haven't improved at all after being suppressed for so long. It seems like I'll have to seal you again and teach you a lesson, the 7 Brilliance Demon Emperor said coldly in the sky. 100 li away, Garuda looked at the celestial demonic imperial family in front of him. Light flashed in his eyes. After hundreds of thousands of years, the 7 Brilliance Demon Emperor was even stronger than before. Demon Emperor, you're exaggerating. I was just joking with the real messenger. Now, I'll set off for the western battlefield. As soon as he finished speaking, Garuda flapped his wings. A golden rock spread its wings and soared thousands of li away. The terrifying existence that was infinitely close to the speed of the world disappeared without a trace in a breath. Demon Emperor. The messenger who had been flung away by Garuda rose and half knelt. Say no more. Go back and rest, the 7 Brilliance Demon Emperor said indifferently. The 7 Brilliance Demon Emperor said indifferently. Then he disappeared from sky-reaching peak. Just as Garuda, who was ranked 3rd among the 8, appeared, Inji returned from the 13th prince's residence in the celestial demonic imperial city. She took the bet of the Een Sea ghost prison and swore her loyalty. Ningchen looked at the woman in front of him. The corner of his lips curled up slightly. His cold smile made people shudder. 3 months later, the true decisive battle would begin. The outcome of this battle would be revealed very soon. Do as I say. This is a critical period. Don't make any mistakes, Ningchen said. Yes. Inji accepted the order and left the palace. The two armies faced each other on the western battlefield. Over the past few months, they had clashed countless times. In front of the Sacred Domain army, 6 men in golden armor stood in the sky. Their powerful royal aura spread out, making people wary. The battle was about to begin. As the battle was about to begin, demonic clouds covered the sun in the eastern sky. Amid the fierce wind, a powerful figure approached rapidly. His speed was shocking. This is? Above the celestial demonic army, Long Zhong was surprised. Garuda, the 7 Brilliance Demon Emperor, had let him out. Garuda appeared on the battlefield, among the 6 palace lords of the sacred domain. Shama's eyes narrowed. Judging from his aura and speed, could he be the legendary variable of the celestial demonic clan, Garuda? The peerless expert who was said to be able to compete with the speed of the phoenix had lived to this era. Chapter 1163. Demonic clouds loomed over the western battlefield of the primordial demon region as Garuda descended. Strong winds swept across the battlefield, filling the air with dust and sand. The peerless expert ranked 3rd among the group of 8 had appeared. Everyone looked over. Long Zhong roared from the dark clouds in the sky, greeting the newcomer. Long, how have you been? Garuda stood in the sky, looking at the giant winged dragon in the dark clouds in front of him. Garuda, congratulations on regaining your freedom. Long Zhong replied. There's no need to congratulate me. The 7 luminaries demon emperor only let me out so that I can fight. Is the heavenly demonic imperial tribe so weak that they can't even deal with a few small fries? Garuda glanced at the sacred realm army in the distance and sneered. Don't be careless. Long Zhong said in the dark clouds in a heavy tone. The Golden Lion tribe's strength has improved by leaps and bounds. They're not easy to deal with. Is that so? Garuda responded faintly and stepped forward, 1 step at a time. Xianzhen looked at Garuda's back in front of the heavenly demonic army with a solemn expression. Garuda was the variable in the group of 8. He did not expect the 2 demon emperors to let him out. On the other side, in front of the sanctuary army, the 6 sanctuary palace lords in golden armor looked at the approaching figure with a serious look in their eyes. Garuda is ranked 3rd among the group of 8. He's only inferior to Tianzhong and Azura. This battle won't be easy. Be careful, Shama reminded them. The 5 Sacred Realm Palace lords nodded. They had already experienced Long Zhong's strength. Now that an even stronger member of the group of 8 had arrived, this battle would be even more difficult. Who's going to fight? Luo Jia, the 3rd Palace Lord, asked with a serious expression. I'll do it. The leader of the 2nd Palace, Duru, walked out. His domineering and majestic body contained the power to fight against the heavens. He looked forward and said in a low voice, Luo Jia, Shama, you two observe his moves. If we want to defeat him, we'll have to rely on you two. Luo Jia's expression turned serious. Be careful. It doesn't matter if we win or lose. The sacred realm isn't afraid of losing. If we can't beat him, we'll leave immediately. Up ahead, Duru responded and continued walking forward. Between the 2 armies, King Realm cultivators were confronting each other. Ling Li was also a King Realm cultivator, but their auras were different. The burly 2nd Palace Master of the Holy Region, Duru, was extremely domineering. His bronze muscles were filled with explosive power. Among the 12 Palace Masters of the Holy Region, his physical strength was the strongest. Even Luo Jia and Shama, who were ranked at the top, paled in comparison to him in terms of strength. On the other side, Garuda stood in the void. His aura was restrained, and he did not look outstanding. However, everyone present knew that the person in front of them was a true cultivator. In front of the Sacred Saint Army, Luo Jia and Shama were watching the battle in front of them with grim expressions. Duru's strength wasn't weak, but his opponent was Garuda. This battle would probably be very difficult. Between the 2 armies, kings faced off against each other. A great battle could break out at any moment. The atmosphere was so oppressive that it was hard to breathe. Duru looked at Garuda in front of him. His body was tense, and he was on full alert. You don't dare to make the first move? Then let me do it. Seeing that Duru had no intention of making the first move, Garuda sneered. He stepped forward, and his figure instantly disappeared. His speed was so fast that it was difficult to see with the naked eye. In the blink of an eye, Garuda was in front of the 2nd Palace Master of the Holy Region. His sharp claws tore through the air, and the wind howled. A sharp light tore through the air and tore at the former's chest. Sensing danger, Duru subconsciously took half a step back to avoid the sharp claws. Then, with a furious roar, he clenched his fist and punched back. Boom! The shocking divine power of the punch broke through space and time and directly hit Garuda's body. Outside the battle, the experts of the Celestial Demonic Imperial family and the Holy Region became nervous. They were worried about the result. Your strength is not bad, but it's too slow. In the front of the battle, the 2 figures appeared in the violent airflow. Garuda closed his wings in front of him and blocked the heavy punch. His wings were as hard as metal and indestructible. Even though Duru's punch was shocking, it was difficult to damage him. Seeing that his attack was ineffective, Duru's expression hardened. With a shout, his body shone with golden light, and a steady stream of energy poured out of his body. He raised his right fist and smashed down once more. A brute with only strength. You don't make me interested in fighting. Garuda's face flashed with a bored expression. His figure flashed, and he instantly appeared behind Duru. His heavy palm landed on Duru's back. Arg! With a muffled groan, Duru was sent flying dozens of meters. Blood splattered, dyeing his golden armor red. Duru! In front of the Holy Region army, the 5 Holy Region Palace Masters' expressions changed. None of them had thought that Duru would be injured in less than 3 moves. The difference in speed is too great. Duru can't use his advantage in strength at all, said Luo Jia gravely as he looked at the battle. Get ready to attack at any time, reminded Shama. Yes. Luo Jia nodded, his aura surging. There was no longer any suspense about the outcome of this battle. Victory or defeat wasn't important. What was important was that nothing happened to Duru. Just as the 2 Holy Region Palace Masters were preparing to attack at any time, the battle between Duru and Garuda became even more desperate. In just a few moves, Duru's body was covered in blood. His shining golden armor was now dyed scarlet. There were holes all over it, and blood was constantly flowing out. It was a dazzling sight. 100 steps away, Garuda was calmly standing in the air. Sharp claws protruded from his hands, and blood dripped down. It was a terrifying sight. Duru steadied himself and forcibly suppressed his injuries. Determination flashed in his eyes, and his true yuan continuously surged. His chi and blood instantly ignited, burning wildly. Garuda was a huge obstacle to the holy region. Before Luo Jia and Shama found a way to deal with him, he couldn't be defeated like this. Wild Bull's strength. With a deep roar, the phantom of a giant mutated beast appeared behind Duru. In an instant, the sky above the battlefield shook violently, unable to withstand this terrifying king's might. Not good. Luo Jia and Shama's expressions changed when they saw the second Holy Region Palace master going all out. They rushed toward the battlefield. Garuda's sneer deepened as he saw his opponent going all out. His wings flapped, and he was like a bolt of lightning. He was so fast that no one could see him. Duru's fist smashed down, and the world collapsed. A boorish man will always be a boorish man. Making the same mistake is foolish beyond compare. Garuda appeared behind Duru, and his claws pierced through Duru's back. Ugh! Burning blood spurted out of Duru's chest. The claws had pierced through his body, tearing apart his heart. Duru! Luo Jia and Shama, who had rushed over from behind, were shocked. Duru reached out to grab the claws that had pierced through his chest. He turned with difficulty and said hoarsely, "Caught you. This is the true desolate bull's strength." With that, Duru's body rapidly fell, smashing into a distant mountain. In the next moment, a huge tremor rang out, and a large mountain outside the battlefield crumbled. Rocks flew everywhere, turning into a rain of rocks. After the tremor, dust filled the air, and a winged figure slowly rose up. There was no suspense about the victor, but he was no longer as calm as before. Blood dripped from the corner of his mouth. Even someone as strong as Garuda could not escape unscathed from the second Holy Region Palace master's final attack. Duru! Shama's figure flashed, and he arrived at the foot of the mountain. When he saw the figure buried under the boulder, he clenched his fists. In the air, Luo Jia blocked Garuda's path, unable to hide the anger in his eyes. The great battle was about to begin. The dragons descended from the sky, and their powerful auras made it hard for anyone to ignore them. It's not good to continue fighting. Retreat. Shama brought Duru's corpse out from under the boulder. He sent a voice transmission to Luo Jia before leaving the battlefield. Luo Jia snorted coldly and did not continue fighting. He took a step forward and left. In front of the heavenly demon army, Xianzhen looked at the two retreating Holy Region Palace masters and did not give the order to chase. In today's battle, the two strongest palace masters of the Holy Region did not participate. Even if he gave the order to chase, it would be difficult to achieve greater results. The Holy Region had lost a palace master, which was a great loss. Since the start of the battle, the heavenly demons had finally gained the upper hand. Thinking of this, Xianzhen looked at Garuda, who was in the battlefield, and narrowed his eyes. Garuda's personality and reputation aside, this peerless expert ranked third in the 8 was indeed shockingly powerful. If he could recruit him, he would be a great help to Xianzhen. In the 13th Crown Prince's residence in the 3rd Imperial City, the battle report came in. Ning Chen's eyes flashed as he read the contents of the report. Garuda, that anomaly of the 8? It seemed that his words to the 9th Prince had worked. The two demon emperors were unable to invite Azura, so they had no choice but to send Garuda, who was harder to control, to fight. 4 of the 8 had already appeared. They were Azura, Garuda, Gandharv, and the Dragon Horde. The remaining 4 would not have to wait for too long. The forces in the open were always easier to deal with than the forces in the dark. He had to find a way to force the remaining 4 of the 8 to come out. Only then could he find a way to deal with them. Thinking of this, Ning Chen got up and walked out of the residence. In the 3rd Crown Prince's residence, after Xian Qing was released from confinement, the quiet Crown Prince's residence had regained its usual liveliness. In the past 10 days, the Crown Prince's residence was constantly visited by members of the royal family. Whether or not they had stood by when the third Crown Prince was confined, they all came to visit as if nothing had happened. Xianqing did not point it out. He also pretended that nothing had happened and received the visitors one by one. He knew very well that his battle with the Crown Prince and the 13th Prince would become more and more intense. At this time, he had to fight for any power. Your Highness. At this moment, outside the imperial palace, a guard quickly walked in and bowed respectfully. The 13th Prince requests an audience. Hearing this, Xianqing frowned slightly. The 13th Prince? Why is he here? Invite him in. Yes. The guard ordered and got up to leave. Not long after, outside the imperial palace, a white-haired figure in plain clothes appeared and walked in step by step. Inside the imperial palace, Xianqing got up and looked at the person. Light flashed in his eyes. Inside and outside the imperial palace, their gazes collided. An unconcealable pressure spread out, making people not dare to approach. Chapter 1164. Heavenly Devil Imperial City, Third Crown Prince's Residence, Jiming by Residence. The two Heavenly Devil Crown Princes looked at each other and the air pressure around them collided. Around the palace, the maids and guards were all pushed back a dozen steps by the strong pressure. They couldn't get close. Greetings, third brother. Ningchen bowed and said with a smile. You're too polite. Xianqing said, please come inside. Ningchen nodded and walked into the palace. Sit, Xianqing said calmly. Thank you. Ningchen said and walked to the guest seat on the left and sat down. On the main seat, Xianqing looked at him and asked, 13th brother, why did you come to my residence today? Too many things have happened these days and I'm scared. So I wanted to talk to you, third brother. Ningchen said sincerely. Xianqing was surprised and said, 13th brother, you've been given the Pearl of the 9 Kings. Now you're in a good mood. Why are you scared? Ningchen sighed and said, I'm not prepared. I'm always worried about my gains and losses. It seems that you're much worse than me. Xianqing sneered in his heart. These days, the 13th Crown Prince's residence was full of visitors. He didn't see anything wrong with his brother. Now, everyone in the imperial city could see that the 13th Crown Prince was trying to strengthen himself at all costs. He wanted to get involved in the fight for the throne. However, Xianqing didn't say it out loud. He looked at Ningchen and said with a smile, 13th brother, you have to learn to get used to your current identity. Being the Crown Prince is an honor for you. It's something that everyone envies. Ningchen nodded lightly and didn't continue on this topic. He looked at Xianqing, who was sitting on the main seat, and said, Brother, I have something to ask you. I hope you can answer my question. What is it? Xianqing asked. The situation with the 8. Ningchen said seriously, Third Imperial brother, you know that the 5 Imperial clans have joined hands to invade our demon race's territory. Except for the southeast battlefield, we don't have any advantage in the other battlefields. Since we have experts like the 8, why don't we send them all to support the front line? Xianqing's expression turned serious. After a while, he replied, Only the 3 demon emperors know about the situation of the 8. I only know that after the ancient war, the 8 all disappeared, especially the Tianzhong, Yaksha, and the others. There is no news about them. If the 8 did not appear one after another during the war between the 5 royal families and the demon clan, even I would not know that the 8 are still alive. Hearing this, Ningchen narrowed his eyes and said, Now, among the 8, Azura, Garuda, Gandharv, and the dragon race have all appeared. I presume the remaining 4 will not be too far away from appearing. Third Imperial brother, why don't we make a bet? Bet on what? Xianqing frowned. The fight for the throne. Ningchen said slowly, I know that Royal Brother is determined to obtain the imperial power. Coincidentally, Royal Brother also wants to fight for it now. However, I don't want to hurt the harmony between us brothers because of this. Why don't we make a bet? Let's not talk about the 8 who have already shown up. Let's bet on who among the 4 remaining members of the 8 can rope in 2 people faster. The winner will inherit the imperial power, and the loser will automatically withdraw. Hearing this, Xianqing frowned again and said, 13th imperial brother, don't you think it's too childish? Ningchen smiled and said, compared to playing tricks and making both sides suffer, I think there's nothing wrong with playing a little. At the very least, neither imperial brother nor I know when the remaining members of the 8 will show up, or who will show up first. It's fair and just. As for who can win the 8 over first, that will depend on each person's ability. Hearing this, Xianqing frowned and could not make a decision. He had fought with the 1st Crown Prince and the 7th Crown Prince for so many years, but it was the first time he heard of such a childish way to decide the throne. In the guest seat, Ningchen did not disturb the 3rd Crown Prince and let him think. His suggestion was actually very beneficial to Xianqing. The celestial devil royal family valued bloodline the most. Among all the princes, Xianqing was undoubtedly the one with the noblest bloodline. After waiting for a long time, Xianqing still did not make a decision. Ningchen added more chips and said seriously, 3rd imperial brother, haven't you always wanted me to help you? As long as you can win, I will do my best to help you win the throne. Hearing this, Xianqing's eyes flashed. He looked at the person in front of him and said in a low voice, 13th imperial brother, what are you thinking? What good will it do you to do this? I'm just giving myself a chance. Ningchen said calmly, in terms of foundation, I am far from 3rd imperial brother. The battle for the throne has always been cruel. I don't want to fight to the death with 3rd imperial brother. In the end, I will be doomed eternally. Although the method just now seems childish, it is the fairest method. The group of 8 is an important fighting force of the imperial family. With the support of the group of 8, the throne will not be far away. Speaking of this, Ningchen paused and continued, 3rd imperial brother, you and I have fought side by side. Even if there is a winner in the future, I hope we can leave each other a way out. With your foundation in the celestial devil royal family, you have a much higher chance of winning than me. I propose today's bet just to leave myself a way out. Xianqing was silent. After a long time, he said, let me think about this for a few days. I will give you an answer as soon as possible. Hearing this, Ningchen did not urge him. He nodded and said, then I will wait for your answer in the mansion. Take care. Xianqing stood up and sent him off. Ningchen cupped his fists and bowed, then turned and left. Xianqing looked at the departing figure in front of him. Light flickered in his eyes and he said, what do you all think? I can't see any flaws. In the hall, the 4 profound entrances appeared out of nowhere. Dongxian Yuting, who was the leader, said in a deep voice, the 13th prince's situation is just as he said. No matter how he fights, his chances of winning are far lower than your highness. By choosing this method, even if he loses the fight for power in the future, he has left himself a way out. Yao Xue, what do you think? Xianqing looked at Beixian Yao Xue, who was the smartest of the 4 profound entrances, and asked. I also agree with your judgment, Beixian Yao Xue said with a serious expression. Beixian Yao Xue's expression was solemn. Right now, the 3 crown princes' combined forces are hard to break. Even if your highness manages to topple the 13th crown prince, your vitality will be greatly damaged. At that time, when the 1st crown prince returns from quelling the chaos, how will your highness contend with him? Xianqing nodded. The 2 demon emperors gave the 13th prince the pearl. It was a very delicate move. It could be said that this move put him in a dilemma. If he was not careful, he would lose the whole game. The 13th prince must have seen the current situation, which was why he suggested this method. In the future, they would only have the strength to contend against the crown prince if they were able to determine the victor without harming their foundations. In the 13th prince's palace, Ningchen returned. He walked into the palace and sat down to think. The situation in the future would become more and more difficult. He had no chance of winning the bet with the 3rd prince, but he didn't care. His goal was to force out the remaining 8, and then use the 4 royal families to eliminate them. As for the fight for the throne, it wasn't important. Now, Xianqing and Xianke were both important chess pieces to him. He didn't have enough foundation in the celestial devil royal family, so using them was the best choice. Ningchen. Just as Ning Chen was thinking, suddenly, a majestic voice sounded from the ninth underworld king's palace. Hearing this, Ning Chen was slightly shocked. He immediately stood up and said respectfully, "Master?" As soon as he finished speaking, demonic chi surged in the palace. A domineering figure walked out and looked at Ning Chen. He said, "Have you heard of the 4 immortal slaying swords?" "I've heard of it. Why do you suddenly ask about it?" Ning Chen was confused. A sword was born in the reincarnation sea. It was taken away by someone not long ago. That sword is nothing special, but the spirit on the sword has a shocking origin, Xian Juyo said. The sword spirit of the 4 immortal slaying swords? Ning Chen was shocked. According to the ancient legends, the 4 immortal slaying swords were damaged and the sword spirits had all disappeared. It was unbelievable that the sword spirit of the 4 immortal slaying swords appeared in the primordial demon realm. I don't know the details, but I have felt the powerful chi of the 4 immortal slaying swords. So, I can be sure that the sword that was born in the reincarnation sea has the sword spirit of one of the 4 immortal slaying swords, Xian Juyo said. Ning Chen recovered from his shock and said with a serious expression, "Master, can you sense where the person who took the sword is now?" "North of the reincarnation sea." "He hasn't gone too far," Xian Juyo replied. "Thank you, Master. I will go now." Ning Chen responded, turned around, and walked out of the hall. "What will you do when you find the person who took the sword?" Xian Juyo asked from behind. Ning Chen stopped and said, "Kill him and take the sword." Then, Ning Chen didn't delay and left quickly. In the palace, Xian Juyo narrowed his eyes. Although he rarely spoke, he was very satisfied with this disciple. Sometimes, benevolence was not necessary. With that sword, Ning Chen's strength would increase greatly. Even if his hands were stained with blood, it would be worth it. In the northwest of the central mainland, in the endless ocean, there was a strange body of water that kept stirring. A huge black whirlpool was thousands of miles in diameter. The famous reincarnation sea had been taken away by someone else when the divine sword was born. On the way to the reincarnation sea, a white-clothed figure sped past, faster and faster without stopping. The situation in the imperial city was changing rapidly. He couldn't leave for too long and had to return quickly. He couldn't understand why the sword spirits of the 4 immortal slaying swords had appeared in the primordial demon realm. The 4 immortal slaying swords were world-shaking treasures of the 4 great immortal realms. In their complete state, their power was terrifying. Even emperors couldn't fight against them. When the primordial demon realm and the 4 great immortal realms fought, the immortal realm hadn't collapsed and the 4 great immortal swords weren't damaged. There was no reason why the sword spirits of the 4 immortal slaying swords would appear in the primordial demon realm. As he was thinking, the reincarnation sea was getting closer and closer. The huge black whirlpool that spanned thousands of miles kept stirring. It was a spectacular sight from afar. Chapter 1165. In the reincarnation sea in the northwest of the central continent, the black seawater was stirred up rapidly, forming a giant whirlpool that extended for thousands of miles. In the sky above the sea of reincarnation, a young man in a scarlet robe inlaid with gold walked out with a divine sword in his hand. He was surrounded by the aura of a king. After a year, his strength had improved by leaps and bounds. The current lord of Sunrise Royal City was a rare talent in terms of both talent and luck. Now that he had obtained the sword spirit of the immortal sword, he had improved even further. After obtaining the divine sword, Ness Yao did not stay in the Sea of Samsara any longer and headed north. In the north, at the end of the reincarnation sea, 2 beautiful figures appeared. Behind them, 9 white fox tails swayed. Their powerful auras faintly contained the might of the sovereign path. The 9 heavenly daughters who were born with royal bloodlines were far more talented than the geniuses of the 100 races. Their cultivation progressed by leaps and bounds. The 2 heavenly ladies of the Fox clan, who had disappeared for a long time, appeared and tried to kill the current lord of the Rising Sun Royal City. The immortal sword spirit was extraordinary and outstanding. Its powerful immortal elemental energy could be clearly felt even from thousands of miles away. At the end of the sea of samsara, Nes Yao stopped. Looking at the two women blocking his path, his expression turned slightly serious. It was them, the princess of the Fox clan that had been exterminated by the celestial devil imperial family. Leave your sword or leave your life. After the extermination of the Fox clan's saintess, Xiao Xiao, now had a cold expression. Even the 9 white fox tails behind her were dyed with a tinge of black. Her mental state had changed, and the attributes of her cultivation base had also silently changed. 1. Stood quietly beside Xiao Xiao. She had always been quiet, but now she was even more silent. You're courting death. Nes Yao's expression turned cold. With a clench of his right hand, the Shade Cloud Divine Sword was unsheathed. A dazzling sword light shot straight into the clouds, and the winds and clouds of the 9 heavens changed accordingly. A great battle was about to break out. No one wasted any more words. In the blink of an eye, the figures of the Holy Maiden of the Fox clan and the Rising Sun Lord moved at the same time. Heavy palms and divine swords collided with each other. Foxes had innate talents and were extremely talented. Weapons had acquired skills and were tempered thousands of times. When lightning met, heaven and earth would be moved. Heavenly Woman and Golden Crow shook the stars. The two great illusions clashed, causing the entire ocean surface to surge violently. Enormous waves overflowed into the heavens. The scene was horrifying. The two peerless geniuses of the younger generation clashed head-on. Their shocking strength was no less than that of the older generation. Behind Nes Yao, the 3-legged golden crow phantom let out a long cry towards the sky. Golden flames filled the air, turning the battlefield on the surface of the sea into a world of flames. For the first time in the world, the scene of water and fire coexisting in the sky appeared. Even the boundless ocean could not stop the golden crow's flames. The water vapor rapidly evaporated and rose into the sky, turning into clouds. Clouds and mist covered the sky as Biyun's divine sword revealed its divine might. The might of the sword rapidly increased. Above the 9 heavens, dark clouds stirred and thunder rumbled. Seeing that her opponent's strength was astonishing, Xiao Zhao's expression turned serious. Her delicate hand circulated the power of the demonic sovereign's blood. Immediately, 9 magnificent figures appeared in the mortal world. Golden light shone and created a storm that was 10,000 zhang tall. Within the golden light, Xiao Zhao's figure moved. Her figure instantly disappeared, and when she reappeared, she was already in front of the golden crow. As her slender hand descended, her seemingly frail body actually possessed the ability to fight against the heavens. Before her move even arrived, the vast ocean below was unable to withstand the terrifying pressure and split apart. Nes Yao focused, and Biyun slashed in reverse. A terrifying sword light sliced through the void, welcoming the incoming enemy. Boom! The two powerful forces clashed once again. Rings of shock waves rippled out. Within 1,000 miles, the waves soared into the sky and swallowed the two figures. Heavenly Maiden of the Fox clan, you live up to your reputation. Unfortunately, the Fox clan has already perished. What's the use of a Heavenly Maiden existing? As he spoke, within the gigantic waves that soared into the sky, an extremely terrifying divine might spread out. In the next moment, the waves scattered in all directions, turning into rain as they fell. Within the heavy rain, Nes Yao stood in the air. The divine might around his body rippled, and an ancient sword that looked ordinary but possessed an abnormally powerful might floated up and down. Before it even approached, one could already feel that incomparable pressure. Xiao Zhao's expression sank. It finally appeared. With the appearance of a divine sword, Xiao Xiao did not dare to be careless. Her figure flickered and she made the first move. In the void, Nes Yao swung his sword. The ancient sword radiated with dazzling sword light, breaking through the heavens and treading on the seas. In an instant, the two experts clashed once again. This time, the victor was clear. With a loud rumble, the divine sword broke through the golden light. The shockwaves rippled, and Xiao Zhao's figure was sent flying several dozen meters away. She staggered and stabilized her figure. The unshakable might of the divine sword suppressed the power of the nine-tailed heavenly empress blood with just a single move. Want to? Xiao Xiao raised her hand to wipe away the blood at the corner of her mouth. She glanced at her younger sister who was not far away, and called out. Outside the battlefield, one, silently nodded. Step by step, she entered the battlefield. The nine-tailed heavenly empress manifested behind her, and her powerful might did not lose out to the two present in the slightest. The second heavenly maiden had entered the battle. A cold intent flashed past Nesyao's eyes. Even with a divine sword in hand, he did not dare to be careless. He had already experienced the capabilities of the nine-tailed heavenly maiden. The nine-tailed heavenly maiden who was rumored to have grown into an emperor-level expert, her strength had already far surpassed the other geniuses of the younger generation. Desolate heavenly pardon, immemorial slaughter. One, entered the battlefield. Xiao Xiao solemnly shouted, and the surrounding imperial blood rapidly burned. The nine-tailed mystic art appeared for the first time. In the midst of the killing moves, the heavens and earth trembled. Within a radius of 1,000 kilometers, the dream of the immemorial era was brought back. The sounds of an army resounded throughout the battlefield. When Wan saw this, she simultaneously activated the nine-tailed mystic art. Dazzling golden light filled the battlefield, boosting their might to the extreme. The combined might of the two heavenly maidens shook the heavens and the earth. A terrifying might filled the air, causing the space of the entire battlefield to distort. Great Sun Forbidden Art, 3 points return to origin. Seeing that the incoming attack was extraordinary, Nesyao did not dare to be careless. His finger crossed his sword, and the forbidden art was activated as well. The burning the heavens and boiling the seas technique appeared once more. Golden flames soared into the 9 heavens from Nesyao's body. Amidst the shocking scene, the golden crow's wings flapped, turning into a golden sun, and crashed towards the 2 people in front of him. Mystic arts and forbidden arts clashed, and a dazzling brilliance exploded. Everything collapsed, and they were quickly annihilated amidst the raging winds and waves. The aftermath of the collision caused 3 groans to resound simultaneously. The figures of the 3 peerless geniuses who stood at the pinnacle of the younger generation flew out, each dyed in vermilion red. While retreating, Nesyao looked at the 2 people in front of him who were dyed in red. Ignoring his injuries, he solemnly shouted, and the forbidden art appeared once more. Great Sun Forbidden Art, 3 crows returned to sea. His finger crossed his sword, and golden flames burned the heavens. Behind Nesyao, 3 golden crows appeared at the same time. Exceeding the forbidden art, they brought forth a waterfall of blood mist, which fused into the golden crows' bodies. In an instant, the 3 golden crows charged out at the same time. The destructive power they possessed was unstoppable. The technique that destroyed everything in its path. Thousands of meters away, Xiao and Wan's expressions hardened at the same time. Suppressing their injuries, they joined hands to block the technique. Boom! After launching the first attack, they were already at a disadvantage. Amidst the intense tremors, Xiao Xiao and Wan's figures retreated another few dozen steps, and the corners of their lips were dyed red. Their foundations and cultivations were similar, but their combat experience determined the direction of the battle. Forcefully enduring his injuries, Nesyao launched the first attack, and then seized the advantage in the battle. Let this technique end the legend of the Fox Clan's heavenly maiden forever. Unwilling to fight for a long time, Nesyao raised his technique with all his might. Around Nesyao's body, his true essence surged to its limits, and poured into his divine sword. The might of his ultimate move was so terrifying that it was shocking. The void violently distorted, and large cracks appeared one after another. They rapidly spread, and extended to a distance of 5,000 kilometers. After several tens of thousands of years, the god-ending sword which once again displayed its divine might. The sword's spirit gently hummed, and a dazzling brilliance shot straight into the 9 heavens, illuminating the world. Not good. Right at this moment, Ning Chen, who was rushing over from afar, sensed a familiar aura from the battle ahead. His expression slightly changed, and taking a step forward, he instantly disappeared. In the battle, the divine sword slashed down. The terrifying sword wave split apart the ocean and drew a gigantic hole between the heavens and earth. Boom! The divine sword slashed down, and the intense sound of collision resounded throughout the universe. Raging waves crashed, and the scene was extremely terrifying. Within the gigantic waves, suddenly, the sound of a divine weapon breaking could be heard. As the waves fell, four figures appeared. In front of Xiao Xiao and a white-haired figure stood in front of them. Cracks appeared on the blood-red longsword in his hand, and a few breaths later, it shattered. With the destruction of his astral soul, the final sword pressure rapidly spread out. The ocean surface within 1,000 kilometers instantly calmed down. Looking at the destruction of his astral soul which had followed him for several dozens of years, Ningchen remained silent. With a wave of his hand, he kept the broken sword, and the sadness in his eyes was difficult to conceal. "It's you!" Nes Yao looked at the figure who appeared in the battle. His expression turned cold, and he said, "Enemies truly meet on a narrow road. Since that's the case, let us settle all our grudges today." Ningchen did not reply. His right hand clenched, and the Moon Devil Divine artifact materialized. His silent killing intent was bone-piercing. At the back, Xiao Xiao regained her senses from her shock. With a cold gaze, she brought Wan and retreated from the battle. "Let's go." The scene of the extermination of the Fox clan was still vivid in her mind. When she saw the person who came as the Fox clan's saintess, Xiao Xiao found it hard to suppress the rage in her heart. However, the time was not right, and she could only retreat for now. Wan regained her senses, and sadness flashed past her eyes. Although she was unwilling to believe that the extermination of the Fox clan was related to the person in front of her, the scene back then had already explained everything, and she had no choice but to accept this fact. The Heavenly Devil Imperial clan used the wedding as an excuse to exterminate the Fox clan when they let down their guard. From the beginning to the end, everything was just a scheme. The killing intent behind them could be clearly felt, but Ningchen did not have the time to care about it. His gaze was focused on the sword in Nes Yao's hand, and his expression turned solemn. He had seen execution celestial, slaughter celestial, and trap celestial before, and he was very clear about the auras of these three divine swords. The divine sword in front of him had an aura completely different from the other three divine swords. Its sword aura was unpredictable, and it was hard to sense it clearly. If that was the case, then the sword in front of him was very likely the legendary fourth divine sword and celestial sword. The four divine swords were all different, and N's celestial sword was especially mysterious. In the ancient legends, there were different descriptions of the four divine swords. Execution celestial is powerful, slaughter celestial dies, trap celestial shines with red light, and celestial's transformations are endless, and the blood of Daluo deities stains their robes. The specialty of N's celestial sword was its unpredictable transformations, and its strength was not the slightest bit inferior to the other three divine swords. In the battlefield, the two stood opposite each other, and the air pressure grew heavier and heavier. After exchanging blows more than once, they had a certain understanding of each other's abilities. Great Sun Forbidden Art. The divine sword drew energy, and golden flames burned the heavens. Behind Nes Yao, the three-legged golden crow apparition appeared once more, and the might of a king filled the air, shaking the heavens and earth. Facing a powerful enemy, Ningchen did not dare to be careless in the slightest. The 9 emperor pearls in his body rapidly revolved, and devilish energy surged out, coiling around his body. Outside of the battlefield, Xiao Xiao secretly raised her demonic energy in her right hand, and the illusory image of the 9 tails behind her was dyed black. Her state of mind changed, and the 9 fox tails turned a step further black. The killing intent that filled the battlefield was so dense that it could almost solidify. Turbulent waves were surging, and they could completely erupt at any moment. Chapter 1166. 1,000 kilometers to the north of the Sea of Reincarnation, the supreme immortal blade was unleashed. Terrifying divine might filled the air, raging waves surged, and gigantic waves soared to the heavens. The great battle was about to begin. In front of him, the Moon Devil Divine Sword manifested in Ning Chen's hand. The inverted moon and water reappeared, and devilish energy surged wildly. Outside the battle, Xiao Xiao secretly raised her demonic energy. She looked at the two people in the battle, and her killing intent was not concealed in the slightest. The four supreme experts of the current younger generation gathered together. The atmosphere of the battle was heavy, and it was so oppressive that it was hard to breathe. Ha! An unsuppressible killing intent pierced through the clouds, and it stirred up raging waves. In Ness Yao's hand, the supreme immortal light shone brightly. Wherever the divine might passed, the heavens and earth would collapse. With a single step, his figure flashed forward. His sword was fast and heavy, and the tip of his sword broke through the past. Heroes once cherished each other, and today, they faced each other in life and death. Ness Yao's heart was filled with hatred. He hated his own ignorance, hated his own powerlessness. The divine sword slashed down, splitting the clouds and splitting the ocean. The extremely terrifying divine might surpassed the limits of the world, and it reappeared the might of the four ancient swords. Ning Chen swung his sword, and his divine artifact blocked the divine sword. With a loud bang, the two strongest divine artifacts in the world clashed. An intense shockwave violently spread out. Raging waves rushed towards the sky, and rain poured down. 12 styles of spiritual rhino, sky-raising waterfall. In close proximity, the 9 king pearls spun rapidly, and devilish energy filled his body. Ning Chen's supreme art, the secret art of the moon-worshipping clan, reappeared. In an instant, the sky-raising waterfall surged upwards, striking towards the king of rising sun in front of him. Great sun forbidden art, sunfall. The sky-raising waterfall assaulted him. Ness Yao activated the forbidden art at the same time, and the three-legged golden crow behind him screeched towards the sky. A divine sun descended, forcefully blocking the incoming attack. Boom! A world-shaking tremor resounded. Water and fire collided, and terrifying heat waves frantically surged out in all directions. The entire surface of the sea began to tremble as well. You have indeed changed. You have become cold and heartless. Ning Chen clenched his fist. Devilish energy surged, and he threw a punch. In order to kill you, I am willing to fall into the abyss forever. Lung Xian's eyes were cold, and his sword was cold. With a flip of his palm, Ness Yao raised a golden flame, directly blocking the former's heavy punch. Great sun forbidden art. It was a completely different new realm, moving the heavens and earth with yin and yang. Behind Ness Yao, the three-legged golden crow wings flapped, and the divine flames of the sun incinerated the heavens and boiled the seas. In an instant, the entire sky above the sea region was filled with golden flames, turning into a sea of golden flames. Judgment of the King of Hell's third watch, Avicii Heaven wails. Ning Chen's expression hardened as he turned his sword around to face the King of Hell. Third night judgment. In an instant, the sky darkened, and the rain continued to fall. Ghostly cries rang out, as if hell had descended, and evil ghosts were everywhere. Extreme yin and extreme yang techniques collided with each other in the heavens and the earth, causing rumbling sounds to resound throughout the universe. The sun and moon changed, and gods and ghosts wept sorrowfully. After the extreme collision, 2 muffled groans rang out. In the aftermath of the violent collision, the 2 figures flew back several feet, and the corners of their mouths were dyed red. The surging waves did not stop for a long time. It was like 2 people in a decisive battle. As long as their hatred was not extinguished, the battle would not stop. The figure dashed out, and the might of the immortal sword broke through the sky and the sea. The rising Sun King, whose cultivation and battle intent had reached the peak of his life, attacked with a move that could destroy the heavens and the earth, and the sea water within 10,000 miles flowed backward. The 2 swords clashed again. The might of the swords shook the 9 prefectures. They gave up on the extravagance and returned to the original sword moves. Each and every one of them was merciless and took lives. When they fought again after a year, with the assistance of the 9 king pearls, Ning Chen's strength was similarly stronger than before. With the Moon Devil Divine artifact in hand, he did not fear the end immortal edge in the slightest. The two swords stirred up raging waves, and their extreme might shook the yin and yang. The battle reached its climax, and the brilliance around the two people was dazzling. 12 styles of spiritual rhino, splitting the sea and splitting the flood. Amidst the raging waves, Ning Chen executed his ultimate technique. In an instant, the raging waves separated, and an incomparably surging force broke through the heavens. Facing the incoming attack, Ness Yao did not retreat a single step. He gathered his energy with a heavy punch, and met the incoming attack head-on. The two techniques collided, and rumbling sounds rang out. The impact of the true essence caused the two people's clothes to flutter. Their crowns shattered, and their long hair fluttered wildly. In the battle that was hard to determine the victor, the two people's bodies were greatly exhausted. The aftermath of the battle added to their injuries. Outside the battle, Xiao Xiao and Wan watched the intense battle in front of them, and shock flashed past their eyes. The two people were not the strongest successors of imperial bloodlines. However, when compared to the successors of imperial bloodlines, the strength of these two people far surpassed them. Their astonishing growth that surpassed the limits of their bloodlines. These two people were terrifying to the point of frightening. Even when the various emperor-level experts were young, they were probably only at this level. While the two heavenly fox maidens were shocked, the battle in front of them became even more intense. Divine swords and divine artifacts clashed, and ear-piercing sounds rang out. 3 styles of absolute yang, Sai of the universe. Pushing to the limit, the sword raised a divine sun, and Ness Yao held his sword horizontally. Dense demonic energy roared and surged, and the power to split the heavens and earth apart dyed the entire world gold. It was a move that had never been seen before, and its might was shocking. Ning Chen's expression turned serious. With a clench of his left hand, the wild bone blade materialized. The blade and sword struck out together, each with a sharp glint. The brilliance of the two heavens and earth shone, illuminating thousands of miles of the sea. Boom! The divine weapons clashed, and the aftermath of the clash was chaotic. The blade and sword blocked the divine sword, and sorrowful cries resounded endlessly. The divine sword had a spirit, and it had never been seen before. The blade and sword resonated together, and it was difficult to fight against it. Hearing the sound of the sword, Ning Chen's expression changed slightly. He swung his sword to avoid the battle, and his figure retreated 300 meters away. Not good. The celestial ending sword was too strong. Though the water-moon reversal was a divine artifact, it was still slightly inferior when compared to it. However, this place was not too far away from the primordial devil region. If he were to rashly use the celestial execution and celestial entrapment swords, and attracted the attention of the two devil emperors, the consequences would be unimaginable. Since he could not use the two divine swords, he could only end this battle quickly, and end this battle before the water-moon reversal reached its limit. Thinking up to this point, Ning Chen took a step forward. The sword intent around his body rose to its limits, and an endless sword pressure filled the air, engulfing the entire battle. The sword realm reappeared, and the heavens and earth changed color. Abnormally terrifying sword waves surged within the small world, and gradually, peace returned. Within the sword realm, a plain-clothed figure stood in the air. Her white hair fluttered, and she looked like the Emperor of Swords, causing all swords to submit to her. The sword realm opened, and the battle changed once again. Ness Yao's expression sank, and he circulated the true energy in his body, shielding the energy of the small world outside. This should be the final killing move of the person in front of him. Once this realm was broken, this battle would come to an end as well. 3 styles of absolute yang. The divine sword was raised to the heavens, and the 3-legged golden crow let out a long cry. In the blink of an eye, the 3-legged golden crow entered the divine sword, boosting its might to its limits. Pushing his limits to his limits, the skin around Ness Yao began to crack. A bloody mist exploded, and fresh blood dyed his body red. Divine flames gathered, and the divine sword's brilliance pierced through the heavens and earth. A might that could shock the heavens and make ghosts and deities weep constantly battered the surrounding sword realm. Terrifying tremors resounded, and the sword realm trembled, as though it could collapse at any moment. Nirvana! Ning Chen's eyes narrowed. He took a step forward and swung his sword, absorbing the countless sword intents that surged within the sword realm. With his ultimate move in hand, 10,000 swords lined up. In the next moment, the 10,000 swords pierced through the air. The incomparably magnificent sword energy drew out dazzling trajectories within the sword realm, and it was dazzling. The 10,000 swords arrived, but Ness Yao did not dodge at all. The celestial ending sword that pierced through the heavens and earth slashed towards him, forcefully breaking through the incoming attack. A heaven-shaking boom shook the heavens and earth. The two ultimate sword moves collided, and the aftershocks caused the sword realm to collapse, shattering into pieces. Outside the battlefield, when Xiao Xiao and Wan Er saw this, they regained their senses from their shock. Their figures flashed out, and they retreated 1,000 meters away. The aftershock struck, and furious waves surged. Waves of fire fell into the sea, and white mist rose. The terrifying heat caused the entire battlefield to become even more stifling. Drip! Suddenly, the sound of blood falling into the sea could be heard. It was so soft, yet it clearly entered the ears of everyone present. In the battlefield, blood dyed the arm of a white-clothed figure. The might of a divine sword could not be blocked by a divine artifact. On the inverted water moon, cracks appeared. Evidently, it had already reached its limit, and it could collapse at any moment. Outside the battlefield, Xiao Xiao narrowed her eyes, and a cold intent flashed past her eyes. After creating so many miracles, this time he was finally going to be defeated. At the side, a worried expression flashed past Wanner's face. Even with the hatred of her clan's extermination, the worry in her heart was hard to suppress. Wanlu, get ready to snatch the sword at any moment. Xiao Xiao looked at the battlefield ahead and transmitted her voice. Thmin. Wan Er silently nodded in response. The battle was coming to an end, and the outcome was about to be decided. The divine artifact shattered, and the situation of the battle quickly changed. There's nothing I can do. With a sigh of helplessness, Ning Chen clenched his right hand. Suddenly, the wind and clouds above the 9 heavens changed color. Boom! The divine sword was about to appear, and heaven and earth resonated. Wind and thunder roared in the 9 heavens, and the heavy might attracted countless gazes. What a terrifying scene! Was a supreme treasure appearing? In the battlefield, the 4 origins of water, fire, wind, and thunder appeared together. The image of chaos appeared, and the scene of the primordial beginning reappeared. With a long shout, his white hair was wild. Blood mist rose around Ning Chen's body. On his right arm, a green and red longsword spread out. The natal dual cultivation sword reappeared, and its might shook the heavens. Boom! The sword reforged by the undying origin, transcending the cycle of reincarnation. Heaven and earth could not tolerate it. Above the 9 heavens, lightning fell, wanting to destroy the divine sword. Noisy! Ning Chen frowned and met it with his sword. With a rumble, the sword light broke through the lightning, and the sword momentum did not decrease, soaring into the sky. The sword entered the thundercloud, and the sword broke the sky. The thundercloud instantly collapsed and dissipated. With the appearance of the natal sword, the 4 origins surged around Ning Chen's body. The shocking might was not inferior to the immortal ending sword at all. After accumulating the sword for several years, it soared into the sky. Ning Chen's body moved, and the sword moved. Wind and thunder shook the world. Ness Yao narrowed his eyes and met it with his divine sword. With a rumble, a huge force came from his arm, and he took half a step back. At the same time, in the ancestral grounds of the heavenly devil, the 2 devil emperors opened their eyes and looked in the direction of the sea of reincarnation. What a powerful sword pressure! The 13th brother was actually hiding such a powerful force. In the 9 underworlds king's manor, within the surging devilish energy, Xian Jiuyo looked at the battlefield in the distance, and his concern could not be concealed. divine swords were far beyond the mortal world. Although his disciple's strength was extraordinary, facing the might of a divine sword, could he win this battle? 1,000 li to the north of the Sea of Reincarnation, the sounds of battle could be heard. The sword condensed from the undying source and the world-suppressing treasure of the ancient immortal world collided. Heaven and earth began to collapse and turn into nothingness. Outside the battlefield, Xiao Xiao looked at the battlefield, and the killing intent in her eyes grew stronger. "Want to prepare to attack." Xiao Xiao transmitted her voice and said solemnly. "Your opponent is the Lord of Sunrise Royal City. Remember, you only have one chance. You must not hold back." When Wan heard this, her body trembled, and she nodded lightly. In the battlefield, both of them had raised their strength to the limit. Just as the final move was about to be executed and the outcome was decided, outside the battlefield, Xiao Xiao's eyes shone brightly, and she transmitted her voice. "Now." When her voice fell, Xiao Xiao's figure moved, and she quickly rushed towards the battlefield. The 9 white tails behind her had turned completely black. Chapter 1167. 500 kilometers to the north of the Sea of Reincarnation, the battle between the two swords gradually came to an end. Just as the two were about to make their final moves and the victor was decided, Xiao Xiao, who had been observing the battle from outside, made her move. The 9 black and white tails were ice-cold and glaring. In the blink of an eye, she arrived in the middle of the battle. The cold black demonic energy surged violently. The full-powered palm strike of the Fox Clan's Saintess was directed towards Ji Ming's back. At the same time, behind King Rising Sun, Wan Er's figure silently arrived as well. A world-shaking palm strike suddenly struck out. Caught off guard, Ji Ming and Yao Yao, whose attention was focused on their opponents, were unable to react in time. However, when the heavy palm strike landed on them, the corners of their mouths turned red, and fresh blood dyed their bodies. The divine sword left his hand, and Yao Yao's body fell from the sky, falling straight into the sea below. His fate was unknown. In the sky, Ning Chen staggered and stabilized his body. Suddenly, his chest felt stuffy, and he once again vomited out a mouthful of blood. Xiao Xiao frowned. Looking at the strange light lingering around the former's back, a cold light flashed past her eyes. What was that? Earlier, at the last moment, she clearly sensed that the strength of her palm strike had weakened by a lot. "Pay with your life for my clansmen." With the divine sword in hand, killing intent filled the sky. Xiao Xiao took a step forward, and the flames of hatred burned the heavens. On the other side, Wan suppressed the sorrow in her heart. The 9 white tails behind her danced, and demonic energy surged, piercing through the heavens and earth. Between the two girls, Ning Chen barely stabilized his body. Under the full-powered palm strike of the Fox Clan's Saintess, the divine seal protecting his back gradually collapsed. The sudden change caught him off guard. Ning Chen raised his hand to wipe off the blood at the corner of his mouth. Looking at the two of them, the shock in his eyes was hard to conceal. The aura of the black demonic fox had completely changed. Xiao Xiao swung her sword, and immortal might filled the air, overturning the heavens and earth. Ning Chen calmed himself down. He swung the origin sword in his hand, and took the incoming attack head-on. Thunderous rumbles shook the world. The immortal might of the 4 extreme essences shook the heavens and earth, resounding throughout the universe. The aftermath of the impact aggravated the injuries in his body. The corner of Ning Chen's lips once again turned red, and his injuries worsened. "Wan, what are you hesitating for? Don't you want to take revenge for your clansmen?" Xiao Xiao shouted angrily when she saw her younger sister, who had yet to make a move. Hearing this, Wan's body trembled violently. A moment later, she calmed down and no longer hesitated. Her figure flashed as she rushed into the battle. The heaven-shaking palm slammed down with the force of raging waves. The 9-tailed fairy's imperial might was shocking. Ning Chen's left palm activated the Qilin's supreme art. The 9 heavens star-picking hand reappeared, shaking the stars in the sky. The 2 palms collided, and the remaining energy roared out. Ning Chen, who was heavily injured, was at a disadvantage. Today, I will make you pay for the blood of my people. Hatred filled her heart, and the might of her immortal sword grew even stronger. Xiao Xiao turned into a vengeful black fox. Her sword was incomparably sharp, and her palms were merciless. Amidst the storm-like attacks, Ning Chen's figure moved erratically. He gripped the air with his left hand and the black saber appeared again. The saber and sword moved in tandem as they blocked the attacks of the two white fox fairies. After exchanging several blows, rumbling noises rang out incessantly. The fox race's fairies were hard to come by in 1,000 years. Now that they had all appeared, their power was enough to kill gods. On the other hand, knowing Destiny's State was severely injured and could not exert his full strength. He was gradually at a disadvantage. Boom! The immortal sword and the heavy palm struck him again. Ning Chen's saber and sword collided with the two forces. With a shocking sound, he was forced back several steps, and his arms were dyed red. The situation of his defeat gradually became clear. Ning Chen raised his hand to wipe off the blood at the corner of his mouth, but there was not much emotion in his eyes. You can still be so calm in the face of death. 13th Prince, your heart is indeed as cold as ice. Xiao Xiao stepped forward. Her body was surrounded by a black, demonic aura. The fox race's saintess, who had completely turned black, had a murderous aura that could devour the world. Ning Chen looked at the fox race's saintess, whose aura had greatly changed, and guilt flashed through his eyes. He knew that it was useless to say anything now. How could the truth be explained with a few words? Although it was not his intention, the extermination of the fox race was because of him. While he was thinking, a figure rushed over with murderous aura. The immortal sword slashed down, shaking the world. Ning Chen waved his sword and blocked the immortal sword. He looked at the fox race's saintess in front of him and said calmly, I can only apologize for what happened to the fox race. However, I cannot die here. If you insist on taking my life, then I have no choice but to offend you. After saying that, the demonic aura around Ning Chen increased. He waved his sword and knocked away the opponent in front of him. The 9 king pearls in his body spun rapidly, and demonic aura surged out. The black saber was surrounded by a murderous aura. Ning Chen's eyes were filled with murderous aura. He suppressed the last trace of guilt in his heart and fought with all his strength. He was at the life-knowing state, and he could never be merciful. Xiao Xiao felt the change in the person in front of her. Her expression became serious. She condensed her immortal sword and used 30% of her power. At the same time, Wanner's palm came from behind. Her attack was even more powerful than before. The immortal sword and heavy palm came at the same time. Endless murderous aura was merciless. Looking at the two gradually approaching, Ning Chen's eyes became deep. Demonic aura surrounded his body, and he disappeared instantly. Xiao Xiao and Wanner's expressions changed at the same time. They released their divine senses and changed their moves. Boom! Ning Chen appeared behind Xiao Xiao. His sword radiance was earth-shattering. Sensing danger, Xiao Xiao turned her hand and blocked the attack. After a moment of stalemate, Wanner's figure came. Her slender hand condensed the demonic aura of the Emperor's blood. Her palm shook the sky. Ning Chen's eyes became serious. His saber moved, and the heavens opened instantly. The heavenly book martial arts and the 9-tailed mystic technique clashed with each other, and the battle started instantly. You're seriously injured, but you still have such combat power. The 13th prince of the heavenly demon tribe really lives up to his name. Again. As soon as he said that, the black fox holding the sword came again. The demonic aura of the 9 tails covered the sky, covering all the light. At the same time, Wanner stepped into the sky. Her 9-tailed mystic technique was displayed. White light shone in the world. The surging demonic aura was shocking. At that moment, darkness and light appeared in the sky. One was black and the other was white. It was as if the heavens and earth were infinite. Ning Chen dared not be careless when the two women joined forces. He moved his saber and sword, and his demonic aura rushed to the sky. Ha! Ning Chen's wild white hair was unusually dazzling. He put his saber and sword together, and heaven and earth opened at the same time. Heaven and earth together, life and death defying fate. The heavenly book appeared, and its light shone over the 9 continents. The 2 swords left his hands and turned into 2 beams of light, slashing toward the 2 in the sky. Ugh! The impact of the ultimate move caused the aftermath to roar. 2 muffled groans sounded. The 2 heavenly ladies of the Fox clan, one black and one white, were injured at the same time. Their 9 tails were dyed red. In the middle of the battle, Ning Chen was also affected by the aftermath. His blood and qi surged violently. Ning Chen knew that the opportunity was fleeting. He ignored the injuries in his body and flashed out instantly. The flowing blood dyed the void red. The white-clothed figure flashed and appeared in front of the saintess of the Fox clan. Kuang Gu disappeared. He controlled the waves and the ability to pick stars, immediately blocking all of the former's escape routes. The palm essence arrived like a raging wave. Xiao Xiao was shocked. She blocked the move with her sword, but she had already lost the initiative. Every move was restricted. Behind her, Wan saw the change in the battle situation. She rushed over quickly. Her slender hands shook the heavens and earth, trying to resolve the crisis. There was no time to lose. Ning Chen's attack didn't decrease at all. A strange light rose around him as he activated the divine restriction to block the former's palm. Star-picking hand's final move, reverse formless move. The moment Xiao Zhao's defense fell, Ning Chen's left palm surged with demonic essence. He slammed his palm into the girl's dandan. Ugh! The heavy palm landed on her body. Blood dyed the sky. Xiao Zhao's body flew out, and 30% of her cultivation technique dissipated. At this moment, Wan'er's palm arrived behind her. The divine restriction blocked it, but it couldn't be completely dissipated. Her palm landed on Ji Ming's shoulder. Ning Chen staggered and almost fell to the ground. Blood splashed out and filled the air. You must remember that you can't show mercy to your enemies. Ning Chen turned around and looked at the girl in front of him. If that palm strike had hit his vitals, his injuries would have been several times more severe. Are you responsible for the destruction of the Fox clan? Wan'er asked with sadness in her eyes. No, Ning Chen replied. But before he finished speaking, another sword light came from behind. Xiao Xiao, who was covered in blood, didn't care about her injured body. She used a killing move that could topple mountains and overturn seas. Ning Chen turned around and waved his sword. It was a sword that returned to its original state, but it had the ability to cut the sky and split the sea. Immortal weapons clashed, and heaven and earth wailed. Xiao Xiao, whose cultivation technique had been crippled, groaned and her hand was dyed red again. Swords shouldn't be used like this. Ning Chen took a step forward and closed in. Then, he pointed his finger at the former's hand that was holding the sword. Intense pain came, and Xiao Zhao's hand became unstable. The immortal sword slipped out of her hand. Ning Chen waved his left hand, and the immortal sword returned to his hand. The ancient sword that contained the sword spirit of End Immortal was already covered in cracks. It could be destroyed at any moment. The sword spirit of End Immortal was something that ordinary swords couldn't bear. It wasn't easy for it to last until now. Ning Chen waved his hand and put away the sword spirit. He looked at the Fox Saintess and said calmly, "Stop. You can't kill me." Xiao Zhao's eyes gradually turned blood red, and the 9 black tails behind her surged with demonic qi. It was showing signs of breaking through the limits of her cultivation technique and reaching the peak. Sky Fox worships the moon. At this moment, the surrounding scene changed. In the endless barren land, the moon shone high in the sky. Below, a 9-tailed white fox kowtowed to the moon. The primordial scene reappeared in the world after countless years. In an instant, Ning Chen felt a terrifying tearing sensation coming from his body. With the primordial law on his body, demonic qi couldn't block it. Cracks appeared on the 9 king pearl. The heavenly demon's supreme treasure showed signs of collapsing under the terrifying primordial law. Ning Chen's eyes were filled with murderous intent as he felt the pain. His body flew out instantly. Ning Chen cut down the phenomenon with one sword. He raised his hand and grabbed the girl's throat, no longer showing mercy. "Your Highness, please have mercy." Seeing this, Wan immediately pleaded for leniency. Ning Chen's body shook, and hesitation flashed in his murderous eyes. "You have already destroyed 30% of my sister's cultivation. We are no longer a threat to you. Your Highness, please spare my sister's life." Stepped forward with a pleading look on her face. "This is the last time. From now on, you're on your own." After he finished speaking, Ning Chen withdrew his hand and left without lingering any longer. On the sea, Wan looked at the departing figure, and the sorrow in her eyes deepened. When fate came, it was too late to catch it. When fate left, they were strangers at the ends of the world. Chapter 1168. In the third imperial city, knowing destiny had returned, Ning Chen walked into Jiuyou King's mansion and bowed respectfully. "With your strength, you shouldn't be injured like this." Demonic qi surged in the void and Xian Jiuyou walked out. He looked at his disciple and said, "I feel guilty." Ning Chen said with a gloomy expression, "It's not your fault that the Fox clan was exterminated. You've already avenged them. However, they can't get over it yet," Xian Jiuyou said. "The real culprit behind the destruction of the Fox clan is still at large. The people I killed back then were only his lackeys. Although this matter was not done by me, it still happened because of me. I will not let it go like this." Killing intent flashed in Ning Chen's eyes as he coldly said. Xian Jiuyou sighed. The battle for imperial power had always been cruel. It was an unexpected disaster for the Fox clan to be implicated. His disciple was a sentimental person. It would be difficult to resolve this matter peacefully. After a long while, Xian Jiuyou calmed down and looked at Ning Chen. He said again, "Let me see the immortal sword you took from the reincarnation sea." Ning Chen nodded and summoned the celestial slashing sword. He handed it over respectfully. Xian Jiuyou took the immortal sword from the surging demonic qi. He frowned when he saw the crisscrossing cracks on the immortal sword. The celestial slashing sword that was once famous in the ancient times has fallen to such a state. The spirit of the immortal sword is bound to an ordinary sword. Naturally, it can't unleash its full power. Otherwise, it wouldn't be easy for me to take the sword, Ning Chen said calmly. Xian Jiuyou nodded and returned the immortal sword. He asked, "What do you want to do with this sword?" "Destroy the sword and move the spirit." Ning Chen took the celestial slashing sword and put it away. He said shockingly, "Every divine weapon needs tens of thousands of years or even longer to give birth to a spirit. I have a sword that lives with me. However, I can't wait for tens of thousands of years. Moving the spirit is the only way." Xian Jiuyou's expression turned serious when he heard this. He said, "Think carefully. The spirit of the immortal sword has its own thoughts. If it rejects your sword of life, it will be a devastating disaster for you." "Master, don't worry." Ning Chen nodded. "I won't act rashly before I have full confidence. You have a steady personality, so I don't need to worry about you. However, now that you have taken the initiative to get involved in the struggle for imperial power, you might take risks to increase your strength." At this point, Xian Jiuyou's expression turned serious. "Ning Chen, remember this. You are my disciple. In this primal devil realm, no one can harm your life. Do you understand?" "Disciple understands." Ning Chen bowed respectfully. A smile appeared on his face as he said, "However, don't worry, Master. As long as disciple doesn't want to, no one in the primal demon realm can threaten disciple's life. Master has already walked down the most glorious path. Next, you can quietly watch disciple create his own legend." Xian Jiuyou looked at his disciple. After a long time, a gratified expression appeared on his face. Maybe he was overthinking. His disciple would never lose to anyone. "Go ahead and do it. I will patiently wait for the day when your name shakes the world," Xian Jiuyou said. "Master, don't worry. That day won't be too far away." Ning Chen bowed and said goodbye. "It's getting late. Disciple will take his leave first." After saying that, Ning Chen didn't stay any longer and turned around to leave. In the imperial palace, Xianjiuyo looked at his disciple's back as light flashed across his eyes. The current Ning Chen was very similar to him in the past. He had a proud and unyielding character. In the 13th prince's palace, Ning Chen had just returned and the 9th prince had arrived shortly after. The news was so fast that it was shocking. Outside the palace, Xian Ke quickly walked towards the imperial palace with concern in his eyes. 13th brother. Xian Ke entered the palace and looked at the young man. I heard that you were injured. How are your injuries? Ning Chen glanced at the bloodstains on his body and smiled. It's nothing serious. It's just a small injury. You are the crown prince now. What can't you send someone to do for you? Why did you put yourself in danger? Xian Ke scolded softly. Ning Chen knew that he couldn't hide the appearance of the immortal sword for long. He waved his hand and took out the god-ending sword. Master told me that an immortal sword had appeared in the reincarnation ocean. Hence, I made a trip there. However, the process was a little rough. I fought with the Lord of the Rising Sun Imperial City and was slightly injured. Xian Ke looked over and saw the cracked ancient sword in Ning Chen's hand. He frowned. Immortal sword? Looking at its appearance, it was nothing more than an ordinary sword. 9th brother, don't be fooled by its appearance. I spent a lot of effort to get it. Ning Chen smiled. There is an immortal sword spirit in this sword. However, after a great battle, the sword spirit has fallen asleep. Hence, it looks no different from an ordinary sword. Xian Ke retracted his gaze. He didn't care too much about it. His understanding of swords wasn't even 1,000th of old 13ths. Similarly, he wasn't interested in it. Ning Chen put away his immortal sword and looked at the former with a smile. I haven't had the time to thank 9th Imperial Brother for the matter regarding Azura. It's all thanks to Imperial Brother's appearance that the 3rd prince was able to stabilize Azura and temporarily prevent the eldest prince from returning to the city. There's no need for thanks. Xian Ke said. There's no need to be so formal between us brothers. Rest well. The Imperial City won't be peaceful soon. It's about time for the 3rd prince to make his move. Ning Chen nodded. 9th brother, be careful too. If the 3rd prince knows that you are still on my side, I'm afraid he'll change his attitude immediately. I understand. Xian Ke replied. Hence, I might not be able to come to the 13 constabularies often. If there's anything, report to me secretly. All right. Ning Chen nodded. Xian Ke then left. He didn't stay in the crown prince residence any longer. The situation in the imperial city was complicated and they had to be careful. Seeing the 9th prince leave, Ning Chen retracted his gaze and closed his eyes to rest. In the sky, the sun was setting in the west. The sky gradually darkened. The afterglow of the setting sun dyed the world a beautiful golden color. Suddenly, the light of the divine restriction rose in the crown prince residence. The moment the divine restriction sealed the space, endless sword intent spread out. The sword pressure was like an ocean, drowning the entire crown prince residence. In the ocean of sword intent, an ancient sword covered in cracks appeared out of thin air. The immortal might spread out and could split open the sky. At this moment, in the imperial palace, Ning Chen slowly opened his eyes. With a deep roar, blood mist surged around him. In the flowing light, a peerless immortal sword appeared. The moment he held it, the veins on the sword hilt spread out and pierced into his arm. The surging blood dyed the sword red. The sword of one heart and one vein appeared once again. The moment the immortal sword appeared, the immortal sword in the void felt the danger and immediately resisted violently. The sound of the sword was extremely ear-piercing. In the cage formed by intertwining sword radiances, the immortal sword's power became stronger and stronger. It kept resisting the pressure that came from the surroundings. The immortal slaying sword and the immortal trapping sword have appeared. The immortal slaying sword has also found a wise master. Immortal slaying sword, are you still willing to be trapped in that broken sword and be mediocre forever? Ning Chen looked at the immortal slaying sword in the cage and said. In the void, the immortal slaying sword trembled. After a while, it started to struggle violently again. Stubborn. Then I'll offend you. Ning Chen's expression turned cold. He stepped forward and jumped up with the sword in his hand. Clang! The two swords clashed. The remaining energy shook and the sword radiances that were binding the immortal sword were hit and immediately collapsed. As the two swords clashed, more and more cracks appeared on the immortal sword. Ning Chen's eyes narrowed. He activated his demonic essence and slashed down with all his might. Boom! In an earth-shattering tremor, the ancient sword broke. In an instant, the entire world quieted down. In the next moment, an extremely terrifying immortal might spread out from the God-forbidden space. It was so powerful that one could not even tell the level of the power. Under the immortal might, Ning Chen's skin started to crack. Blood flowed out and dyed his white robe red. With the danger looming over him, Ning Chen did not dare to hesitate. He endured the pain and formed a seal with one hand. Suddenly, the surrounding area was filled with raging winds and 9 giant dragons roared out. The divergent yellow curse appeared again. The 9 dragons roared in the sky and circled around knowing destiny, blocking the impact of the immortal might. Boom! Boom! The immortal might was shocking. One by one, the giant dragons collapsed and scattered between heaven and earth. Great Sword Realm! Sword Emperor! When the last giant dragon collapsed, Ning Chen pointed his finger at the sword. The murky sword current spread out. The Great Sword Realm appeared and strengthened the power of the God-forbidden space. At the same time, in the surging immortal might in the void, an illusory silver immortal sword appeared. Its terrifying power surpassed all the divine weapons in the mortal world. On the opposite side, Ning Chen stood in the air. He looked at the token of the immortal sword in front of him and his expression turned serious. Was this the original appearance of the celestial slashing sword? This power was really terrifying. Knowing that words were useless, Ning Chen did not waste any more time. He took a step forward and attacked again. Since he could not make the immortal sword recognize him as its master, he would force it to submit. Knowing Destiny's sword fell. Water, fire, wind, and thunder roared and surged. The immortal sword sensed it and attacked. Thunderous rumbles shook the sky and earth. The God-forbidden space could not endure this terrifying destructive power and immediately started to shake violently. Ning Chen clenched his left hand and the inverted water moon appeared again. He used both swords to resist the immortal might together. The sound of the swords moved and shook the universe. The Sword of Immortals and the Emperor of Swords were fighting at the peak. They would only stop when one side submitted. Clang, clang. In the endless battle, more and more cracks appeared on the inverted water moon. Even the divine weapon of the Moon Demon clan was on the verge of collapse under the power of the immortal sword. Seeing this, Ning Chen's expression darkened. He slashed his sword again. In the rumbling, the battle was over. In the sword world, the spirit of the immortal sword became weaker and weaker. It had experienced many battles and was no longer as sharp as it was when it was born. Dragon Emperor Sword, you have lived in my body for so long. Shouldn't you use your strength? Ning Chen looked at the Dragon Emperor Sword mark on his right arm. His eyes were cold. He gathered his chi and forced the Dragon Emperor Sword to appear. In an instant, in the earth-shaking tremor, a 5-clawed golden dragon appeared. The Dragon Emperor Sword appeared. The Dragon Emperor Sword in his hand was shocking. Ning Chen held a rare divine weapon on each side. He looked at the spirit of the immortal sword in front of him and said coldly, "If I can't defeat you today, I will change my surname to yours." Chapter 1169. In the 13th Prince's residence, the Knowing Destiny Battle Immortal Spirit. Demonic essence and immortal essence vibrated. With the Dragon God sword in hand, Ning Chen's aura reached its peak again. He used both swords at the same time, shining brightly. A strong sense of danger came. The immortal sword sensed it and immediately awakened. A terrifying immortal aura burst out and slashed down. Ning Chen's expression turned cold. He used the Dragon Emperor Sword to meet the attack. The Dragon Chi and immortal aura collided, and the entire sword realm changed color. After a moment of stalemate, Ning Chen's 4 origins rose again, and his origin sword slashed down. An earth-shattering collision sounded. The immortal sword trembled, and the illusory sword became even more blurry. Pushed to the limit, the once famous celestial slashing sword exploded with its last bit of power. Suddenly, in the small world, silver ancient swords appeared out of thin air, crisscrossing. Thousands of swords formed a formation, unprecedented since ancient times. Ning Chen's eyes narrowed as he looked at the countless swords floating in all directions. His expression darkened. Among the four immortal swords, the celestial slashing sword was mysterious and unpredictable. He had never heard of this sword formation before. It would not be easy to deal with. Thinking of this, Ning Chen shouted. He used both the Dragon Emperor and his origin swords, and his true essence rushed into the clouds. The moment the two swords were activated, red light filled the small world. The extreme Tao of the sword appeared again. The extreme Tao appeared, and the immortal sword sensed it. The sword formation opened at the same time, and the silver sword slashed down at the knowing destiny battle immortal spirit. In the next moment, violent clashing sounds echoed in the small world. Ning Chen used both swords with both hands. One was fast, and the other was heavy. In the celestial slashing sword formation, thousands of swords slashed down endlessly, trying to kill the person who blasphemed the immortal spirit. Ning Chen stood in the sword formation. His figure flashed, and he twisted and turned, dodging one attack after another. The two divine weapons in his hands shone brighter and brighter as he waited patiently for the chance to kill. Boom! Ning Chen could not dodge in time. The Dragon Emperor's sword fighting style sent a strong impact. He took half a step back and used the momentum to leap into the void. Among the 10,000 swords, an extremely powerful immortal sword hummed. Immediately, thousands of sword lights broke through the air and slashed towards the white-clothed figure. Descent of the Sixth Tao. Thousand Demonic Calamity. Supreme Forbidden Sword. In the air, Ning Chen took another step forward and shot up into the sky. At the same time, in the small world, beams of red light shot up into the sky. For the first time, the extreme state of the sword and the forbidden technique of Haoyan Gate merged. In an instant, red light filled the sky above the 9 heavens. The extreme state sword carried the power of lightning and turned into a sword cloud that covered the sun. In the void, Juexian trembled slightly. Tens of thousands of swords turned and pointed towards the horizon. Apocalypse! Above the 9 heavens, Ning Chen waved his sword. Immediately, the sword clouds rolled out. Within the huge red cloud vortex, beams of blood-red sword light pierced through the air. It had the power to destroy the world, shocking everyone. The blood-red sword light fell, and in the void, tens of thousands of swords rushed to the sky at the same time to meet the attack. As the two extreme moves collided, the world lost its color. In the dazzling sword light, the red and silver-colored sword chi collided with each other and collapsed. Above the 9 heavens, the remaining force attacked. Ning Chen spat out a mouthful of fresh blood. In the void, the tens of thousands of silver sword light dissipated. In the raging wind, an ancient celestial sword floated up and down. The sword body became even more illusory. In the sky, Ning Chen's figure slowly descended. Although he was injured, his fighting spirit was abnormally strong. Again, Ning Chen looked at the celestial sword in front of him and waved both swords. Demonic chi surged as he spoke. Juexian let out a low hum. On the sword, rings of silver light spread out. The unyielding fighting spirit was also dazzling. In an instant, the man and the sword moved again. The clanging of the sword reverberated in the sword world. On the dragon god sword, the golden light became dimmer and dimmer. The dragon god sword's dragon chi was severely depleted. The power of the divine sword could not be fully displayed. At the same time, Juexian's sword spirit let out a low hum. The sword body became blurry, and its spiritual chi was rapidly depleted. Knowing that the dragon god sword could not be held for long, Ning Chen used his supreme technique. Behind him, the open heavenly book appeared again. The celestial sword had a spirit, and at the same time, it condensed celestial core power. The outstanding sword spirit surged through the sky and pierced through the sky. Ningchen let out a deep roar. He stepped forward and his figure flew out. Boom! The dragon god and Juexian clashed. The two peak swords of the world clashed. In the terrifying impact, blood spurted out from Ning Chen's left arm. He forcefully held onto the dragon god sword that was about to slip out of his hand. He activated his demonic chi again and resisted the Juexian's sharp edge. After a series of exchanges, the incomparably powerful Juexian's sword spirit finally reached its limit. With a clang, it was sent flying. After one strike, the dragon god sword could not hold on anymore. A golden light flashed and turned into a sword mark that sank into Ning Chen's right arm. In the sword world, Ning Chen held his sword and walked forward. Blood kept dripping from his arms. It was abnormally glaring. After 10 steps, Ning Chen stopped in front of the celestial sword. His eyes looked at the dimmed Juexian sword in front of him. He said calmly, "The ancient era has passed, but the new golden era has arrived. Do you really not want to recreate the ancient glory in this era?" Juexian trembled slightly. The illusory sword body flashed, and in an instant, it dimmed again. Ningchen raised his hand and grabbed the Juexian sword. This time, he did not have any defense. He directly grabbed the sword with his flesh and blood. The sharp celestial sword cut open his skin, bringing out a waterfall of blood. Ning Chen held the Juexian sword and said in a deep voice, "My body was reforged from the immortal peach tree. My sword was reforged from the origin of the divine tree. I will bear your edge and not disgrace the name of Juexian." Juexian trembled. The dimmed sword body tried to break free from Ning Chen's hands several times, but it did not succeed. "Ha!" he shouted again. Demonic chi surged around Ning Chen. The Juexian sword pierced through his palm and into his arm. Bit by bit it disappeared. The surging blood mist covered the body of the knowing destiny state. The moment the celestial sword entered his body, the natal sword also disappeared and entered his body. The celestial sword spirit and the natal sword entered his body at the same time. After a few breaths, two swords appeared above the ocean-like Dantian Chi Si. The strong sword pressure set off thousands of waves. Boom! In the Chi Si, dark clouds covered the small world of its own. Thunder roared in the small world as if it was a sign before something big happened. The entire small world began to shake. The endless waves swept across. In the sky, the two divine weapons approached slowly. This was something that no one had ever done before. Today, the knowing destiny state was bold enough to try it. In the sky above the Chi Si, the divine weapons approached. The repulsive force became stronger and stronger. The void shook and cracks were everywhere. Outside, Ningchen was hit by the aura in his body. Blood kept flowing from the corner of his mouth. However, success or failure depended on this. How could he give up? In his Dantian, the two divine weapons gradually merged. The repulsive force became more and more terrifying. Below, the Chi Si was raging and stormy. It was like the end of the world. Around the Dantian, cracks began to appear. His flesh and blood could not bear the terrifying force. There were signs of collapse. At this moment, the origin of the immortal divine tree in Ning Chen's body automatically recovered. Endless vitality filled the air and repaired the broken Chi Si. Destruction and rebirth continued to cycle in the knowing destiny state's body. An indescribable pain assaulted his body. Even someone as strong as Ning Chen began to tremble violently. Cold sweat dripped down his forehead like rain. At the same time, in his Dantian's Chi Si, the immortal sword spirit and the origin sword merged little by little. Although the divine weapon had yet to take shape, a terrifying pressure gradually spread out. Boom! Inside the small world, lightning streaked across the void, illuminating the dark space. The divine weapons were in the final stage of merging. The space around the divine sword distorted violently as if it could not bear this terrifying existence. Ugh! In the outside world, Ning Chen suddenly staggered and vomited a mouthful of blood. A strong backlash hit his body, adding new injuries to his already injured body. At the same time, Far away in the heaven beyond heaven's reverence moon holy ground, a man felt something. She immediately stood up and looked in the direction of the red phoenix star field. This was his aura. What's wrong? Beside her, Qin Ning asked. I feel his aura, a man said softly. She could not be wrong. She had nurtured that sword for a long time and was very familiar with it. She would never mistake this feeling. He should still be in the original demon territory. Logically speaking, the connection between you two shouldn't be so far away, Qin Ning said with a frown. Logically speaking, it should be so. Not far away, Mu Qingxue walked over and said calmly, however, if the connection is strong, it's not impossible. With his personality, it's not strange for him to do something crazy. Hearing this, Qin Ning frowned again. It was indeed possible. That brat wouldn't be doing something suicidal again, would he? A man's eyes flashed with longing. When would he come back? She was still waiting for him to fulfill his promise and give her a peaceful world. In the original demon territory, in the Crown Prince's palace, Ning Chen's body kept trembling. His terrifying willpower endured the terrifying pain and refused to give in. Above his Dantian's Qi, the two divine swords had completely merged. However, the strong repulsive force did not disappear. Instead, it became more and more intense. Your mission is over. Leave the rest to me. As he spoke, demonic qi surged above his Dantian's Qi. A black-clothed figure walked out. They had the same appearance but a completely different aura. As the demonic body appeared, demonic flames surged out. He used his body as a furnace to refine the divine weapon. The demonic flames engulfed the divine weapon and bore all the repulsive force. Outside, Ning Chen's body fell down powerlessly and crashed onto the ground. Blood flowed out and dyed the ground red. In the battle between man and sword, the man won the sword in the end. Around the Crown Prince's palace, the divine restriction gradually disappeared. Thunder rumbled in the sky and rain poured down. In the heavy rain, Ji Ming, who was unconscious on the ground, did not wake up. He was like a person who had been tired for a long time. Even a short rest was so precious. Outside the Crown Prince's palace, the ghost carriage rushed over. It stopped in front of the palace and a beautiful figure walked out. Her pale face was strangely charming. Where's the Crown Prince? Yinji looked at the two guards in front of the palace and asked. He's been in the palace. One of the guards bowed and answered respectfully. Yinji nodded and walked quickly into the palace. In front of the palace, a white-clothed figure was lying unconscious on the ground. His body was covered in blood and it was a shocking sight. Seeing this, Yinji's eyes shrank. She immediately rushed forward and helped the former up. Your Highness! Yinji shouted anxiously. Her Yin essence entered the former's body to check his injuries. When the Yin essence entered his body, it was like a stone sinking into the sea. It disappeared without a trace. Yinji's face changed. What's going on? His Highness's body seemed to be completely different from ordinary people. Chapter 1170. In the third imperial city, it was raining continuously. After the downpour, the rain gradually weakened and continued for nearly 2 days. In the 13th prince's palace, a white-haired figure in plain clothes sat quietly in front of the fire. His eyes were tired as if he had not rested for a long time. Opposite him, Yinji looked at the 13th prince in front of her. A trace of seriousness flashed across her cold face. Why would the 13th prince faint in her palace for no reason? Could it be that there was something wrong with his body? Your Highness. After thinking for a long time, Yinji finally could not suppress the worry in her heart and asked, Why did you suddenly faint in your palace? I went to the reincarnation ocean not long ago and was slightly injured when fighting for the immortal sword. It's nothing serious. Ning Chen answered honestly. Immortal sword? Yinji frowned and said, A few days ago, there was a strange movement in the reincarnation ocean. Many people went there but almost none of them came back. Could it be that those strange movements were the premonition of the immortal sword's birth? Ning Chen nodded and said, The Lord of Sunrise Imperial City is very lucky and brought the immortal sword out from the reincarnation ocean. I was instructed by my master to go and stop him. It took me a lot of effort to get the immortal sword back. Congratulations to your highness for obtaining another divine weapon. With the help of the immortal sword, your highness's strength will definitely be greater than before. Inji said respectfully. Let's not talk about this for now. Ningchen changed the topic and said, how is the matter I asked you to do? It's all arranged. Inji replied, once your highness gives the order, the spies planted by my race will immediately take action. Ningchen nodded and looked at the flickering fire in front of him. Ripples flashed across his tired eyes. It was finally going to end. Your highness, will we anger the two demon emperors by doing this? Inji expressed her concern and asked. Ningchen replied softly, but don't worry. Before there is conclusive evidence, even the two demon emperors can't casually take action. The reason I asked you to use non-ghost race people is to not give the two demon emperors a chance to cause trouble. But your highness is going to fight for the throne in the future. If the two demon emperors are dissatisfied, won't you be destroying your future? Inji did not understand. You know too little about the two demon emperors. Ningchen stretched out his right hand and warmed it above the fire, dispelling the chill in his body slightly. He continued, they have never approved of me. The reason why they gave me the 9-king pearl was so that I could keep the third prince in check while the first prince was away. Now, the first prince is the only candidate that the two demon emperors approve of. Inji's face was slightly shaken. So it was like this. The ghost race was far away from the 3 imperial cities, and they didn't have a complete understanding of the situation in the imperial city. As for the two demon emperors' thoughts, it was even harder to guess. If that was the case, the ghost clan would have no chance of winning if they chose the 13th prince. Ningchen raised his head and looked at the change in the girl's expression. He smiled faintly and said, actually, you don't have to panic. Speaking of this, Ningchen stood up and walked to the front of the palace. He looked to the west and sneered, who can get the celestial devil royal family's unification will depend on who can live to the end. That demon Emperor Kun-yi can't be trapped in the easternmost land forever. Therefore, although the crown prince has the support of 2 demon emperors, he may not be the final winner. As long as the position of the celestial devil royal family remains undecided, the balance of power between the 3 sides will not be broken. Let's wait patiently. Since the ghost tribe has made a choice, you should believe in your own decision. Inji was silent. After a while, she bowed respectfully and said, thank you for your advice, your highness. Is there anything else? If not, you may leave. Ningchen said calmly. Goodbye, Inji. Inji replied softly and turned to leave. After Inji left, the imperial palace became quiet again. Only the crackling sound of the furnace fire could be heard from time to time, adding a little liveliness to the quiet crown prince residence. Ningchen looked at the gloomy rain outside the imperial palace and stood silently. Thoughts flashed through his tired eyes as he weighed every step he had to take in the future. Shiyu, go boil a pot of... After thinking for a long time, Ningchen felt a little thirsty. He subconsciously called out, but before he could finish, he suddenly paused. Returning to his thoughts, Ningchen looked back at the empty imperial palace. His eyes dimmed. He almost forgot that the 2 girls had left. Sighing softly, Ningchen walked out of the imperial palace. Not long after, he came back with a teapot and green tea. He walked to the front of the furnace and started to boil the tea himself. The quality of the tea in the residence was not bad. There was no need for exquisite tea skills. The fragrance of the tea gradually spread out. Not long after, the tea was ready. Ningchen poured a cup of tea. Looking at the green tea leaves floating in the tea, a nostalgic look flashed across his face. After so many years, he had tasted countless famous teas and defeated one enemy after another. However, he could no longer find the feeling of meeting a worthy opponent. Fan Lingyue, what a pity! The few failures in his life were all given to him by this northern Meng military advisor. She still remembered clearly that when they first met, although the young man in front of her was stunning, he was only above the younger generation. In just a few years, This person could already look down on the heroes of the world and was not even afraid of the Emperor realm experts. What was more terrifying was that there were too few people who knew about this. In the world's impression, the heavenly demonic crown prince was still a young man who lived under the protection of the netherworld demon emperor. Although he was strong, he was not at the top. There are countless experts in the world. In the west, there are the two palace masters, Luo Jia and Sha Luo. In the north, there are the three witch empresses, Enyu, Hong Shui and Bai Ji. The heavenly demonic imperial family also has peerless experts like Azura and Garuda. My strength is not small compared to these seniors. Ningchen replied humbly. You have cultivated for too short a time. It is already unprecedented for you to have today's achievements. Although there is still a gap between you and them, it is not too big. At least you don't have to look up to them. Go Huang said seriously. Ningchen smiled and did not talk about this topic. He changed the topic and said, Senior Go Huang, how is the progress? Azura will not be in seclusion for too long. Once he takes action, the situation will change again. Hearing this, Go Huang's expression became serious and he said seriously, there is some progress, but it still needs time. We can only rely on your highness to deal with the primordial demon region. Ningchen nodded. The heavenly demonic 9 transformations had been perfected by generations of demon emperors. It was close to perfection. It was not easy to find the flaw. Only Go Huang, who was proficient in deduction, could do it. It could be said that the most important part of this plan was Go Huang. Senior Go Huang, there is something that I would like to say. Ningchen looked at the aging Go Huang and reminded him, although Miss Tian Xian is talented, she is still young. It will not be easy for her to bear the burden of the sorcerer tribe's rise and fall. Senior, you should plan ahead. Hearing this, Go Huang fell silent. The 13th prince was right. He had to plan ahead for the future of the sorcerer tribe. It is getting late. I will take my leave. Seeing that Go Huang was deep in thought, Ningchen did not stay any longer. He bowed respectfully and disappeared. In the 13th prince's palace, Ningchen opened his eyes and his consciousness gradually returned. A helpless sigh echoed in the palace and his tired heart became heavier. Why is it that everything in this world is always difficult? Ningchen walked to the front of the palace and looked at the autumn rain that had not stopped. The fatigue in his eyes became harder to hide. Go Huang's lifespan was getting shorter and shorter. He might not be able to hold on for much longer. The person who had sacrificed the most in this plan was the Go Huang of the sorcerer tribe. However, Go Huang's sacrifice was unavoidable if he wanted to complete the plan. He did not want to hurt anyone, but he had sacrificed too many people time and time again. If possible, he hoped that there would be no more wars in this world. Chapter 1171. In the northwest of the primordial demon region, on Yangguan Peak, there was a tall building. It was majestic and extraordinary. Clouds swirled around the building, and powerful auras flickered in and out of existence, striking fear into people. The number 1 pavilion was a mysterious force that had existed in the central continent for countless years. It had weathered far too many storms, but it still existed. Rumor had it that the pavilion master of the number 1 pavilion was an expert close to the Emperor Dao. However, no one had truly seen this mysterious pavilion master in the past thousands of years. The pavilion had 4 profound realms, and the 4 sovereign realm experts each guarded an area. Their absolute defense made the number 1 pavilion an impenetrable place. On this day, 2 illusionary figures walked out of the number 1 pavilion. They flickered several times before disappearing into the distance. Rain continued to fall in the 3 royal cities. For several days, the autumn rains still did not stop. Bai Yi stood silently in front of the royal palace in the 13th prince's residence. She had not left since returning from the Sea of Samsara. She had remained in the royal city to observe the situation. Suddenly, Ning Chen's expression froze. He looked outside and squinted his eyes. Something was wrong. Before he had finished thinking, 2 beams of killing intent shot through the air outside the royal palace without any warning. Ning Chen's eyes turned cold. He took a step forward and dodged the two beams of killing intent. Sword chi tore through the air. Two tables in the royal palace were affected and immediately shattered into pieces. Ningchen raised his hand. Demonic chi surged, and the inverted moon appeared. The instant he gripped his sword, killing intent filled the air. Outside the royal palace, the invisible danger arrived once again. Two sharp beams of sword chi shot over together. It was a strange change that had never been seen before. Ningchen took a step forward and dodged the two beams of sword chi. At the same time, he slashed out with the moon demon divine artifact in his hand. The moment the three swords clashed, two figures appeared briefly before him. They were blurry illusions that still could not be seen clearly. What a strange cultivation technique. You've successfully piqued my curiosity. After saying that, Ning Chen's demonic chi erupted. The 9 king pearls in his body spun rapidly, and vast demonic might surged out. With a loud bang, the two assassins were forced back several steps. In the rain, the silhouette of an illusory figure could be vaguely seen, but it was difficult to discern its true appearance. Ning Chen's figure flashed out. The demonic chi around his body protected the divine sword that was covered in cracks. He slashed out with his sword with all his might. The two assassins dodged the divine swords and rushed to the sides of the knowing destiny saint in an instant. Their swords pierced through the air and attacked again. Ningchen turned sideways, and the two swords brushed past each other. The moment they passed each other, Ningchen condensed Yuan in his palms and struck out with an earth-shattering force. At the critical moment, the figures of the two assassins disappeared. The palm energy passed through their bodies, and they were not injured at all. After a single move, the two swords intersected. An even faster sword slashed through the autumn rain, mercilessly reaping lives. Clang! The three swords clashed again, and the cracked inverted moon in water suffered new damage. The crack spread, and it showed signs of collapse. Seeing this, Ningchen frowned. He raised his left palm and counterattacked with a powerful palm force. Boom! Amidst the earth-shattering tremors, the two assassins couldn't turn into the void in time and were forced to take several steps back. Ningchen put away his divine swords, and the demonic chi covered his body. His eyes changed and became cold and emotionless. 12 moves of spiritual rhino, 100 tides set the sky. The moon-worshipping divine martial art appeared again, shaking the heavens and earth with yin and yang. Ningchen's palms turned into a peerless technique, and huge waves surged between the heavens and the earth with shocking power. The two assassins' expressions changed slightly. They didn't dare to hesitate. They combined their swords and resisted the extreme power together. The next moment, the waves hit the sky, and the entire crown prince's residence shook violently. The light of the divine prohibition flickered, protecting the residence. Inside the residence, two figures flew out from the waves. They couldn't avoid it, and their mouths were red. Ugh! 100 steps away, the two assassins, Tianken and Deke, appeared. They staggered a few steps and vomited blood again. After the waves dissipated, Ningchen walked forward step by step. He looked at the man and woman in front of him and said coldly, "I've already spared your lives. Before my patience runs out, tell me who's behind you." Tianken and Deke exchanged glances. They couldn't hide the shock in their eyes. The 13th prince's strength was too different from the information they received. Tianan and Deke of the number 1 pavilion greets the 13th prince. Tianken stepped forward and bowed. He said in a respectful tone. Deke, who was dressed as a woman, also bowed silently. Hearing this, Ningchen's eyes flashed coldly. The number 1 pavilion? That famous assassin organization. Is it the number 1 pavilion that wants to kill me, or is someone paying for my life? Ningchen looked at the two and asked calmly. Your Highness, please don't misunderstand, Tianken said respectfully. Deke and I are here under the orders of the pavilion master to help your Highness achieve greatness. Ningchen squinted his eyes and said, Then what do you mean by what you did before? If we want to join the pavilion master, we have to show our strength. Otherwise, how can your Highness value us? Tianken replied. Ningchen stared at the two. After a long while, his expression changed slightly. Human? You're human? Ningchen asked in a deep voice. Is that strange? Isn't your highness a human too? DK, who was beside Tian Ken, said in an unfriendly tone. Tiansan's expression turned cold. He scolded, Don't be rude to your highness. She's right. I'm a human, Ningchen said coldly. I'm curious. Why does the number 1 pavilion dare to take you in? Or is the pavilion master of the number 1 pavilion a human too? Tian Ken and Deke were silent. Neither of them said anything. Ningchen looked at the two's reaction and understood. He had been wondering why there were almost no human masters in the primordial demon realm. They were all hiding. The number 1 pavilion had always been mysterious. They never asked for reasons when they hired assassins. For thousands of years, they had offended many big clans. However, the number 1 pavilion was very powerful. 100 years ago, a few royal clans had joined forces to attack them, but they were still defeated. It could be said that no one could do anything to this mysterious organization unless an Emperor Realm Master attacked them personally. If the number 1 Under Heaven Pavilion was really an organization formed by human experts, then many things could be explained. Although the primordial demon realm was a flourishing place, the human race had not been completely wiped out. Those martial experts could not have disappeared into thin air. However, even if the number 1 pavilion was a human, it could not be trusted. In this primordial demon realm, the human race had been suppressed for far too long. He was unable to determine what kind of mentality these martial way experts of the human race had. Uncontrollable factors would bring unnecessary variables to his plans. He did need more power, but first he had to make use of this power. You're too weak. Ningchen looked at the two and said calmly, With your abilities, you're not qualified to follow me. DK was furious. He was about to speak but was stopped by Tian Ken. Tian Ken cupped his fists and said respectfully, Since your highness doesn't like our abilities, we won't disturb you any longer. We'll take our leave first. Tian Ken glanced at Deke, who was beside him. Then he stood up and left. Deke suppressed his anger and looked coldly at the man in front of him. He did not say anything and left with him. A day later, Tian Ken and Deke returned to the Cloud Pavilion on Yangguan Peak in the northwest of the primordial demon realm. After entering the pavilion, they knelt down and bowed respectfully. Failed. Within the vast hall, a figure surrounded by multicolored light walked out. He looked at the two of them and said, Don't worry. Pavilion Master, Tian Ken said respectfully. The 13th Prince's abilities exceeded our expectations. Deke and I are no match for him. It's expected. Did he accept your loyalty? The man asked calmly in the light. He refused, Deke answered angrily. DK replied angrily, Pavilion Master, why should we express goodwill to a traitor who defected to the demons? Traitor? The man murmured softly and said, Perhaps what you see with your eyes might not be real. Ever since the 13th Prince joined the Sky Devil royal family, he had been paying attention to him. The longer he watched, the more shocked he was. Over the years, the Sky Devil royal family had been involved in many major events. They seemed unrelated, but in reality, each event was consuming the Sky Devil royal family's strength. First, the 7th Heavenly Demon Crown Prince died on the Dragon King Mountain. Then, the first Demon King was trapped in the easternmost land. Then, the two princes fought each other and both suffered heavy losses. Finally, the 5 royal families worked together to kill the demons. The once prosperous overlord of the world was now in a difficult situation. All of this happened after the 13th Prince joined the Sky Devil royal family. It was too much of a coincidence. However, what was shocking was that there was no trace of the 13th Prince behind all of this. If the truth was as he guessed, then the 13th Prince's intelligence and methods were too terrifying. After thinking for a while, the man came back to his senses. He looked at the two in front of him and said calmly, You can leave now. You don't have to worry about what happens next. Tian Ken and DK bowed at the same time, then stood up and left. Not long after they left, the space in the hall swirled. 4 kings guarding the 4 mysterious realms appeared in 4 vortexes. They sat cross-legged in the air with shocking auras. "What do you think?" The man looked at the four kings in the air and asked. "It's worth a gamble." The only woman among the four kings said calmly, "The Sky Devil royal family's strength is unshakable. It's the first time in so many years that someone has forced the Sky Devil royal family into such a difficult situation. The 13th prince might be the real mastermind." "I don't agree." As soon as the woman finished speaking, a king in the west said in a low voice, "It's all just a guess. If the 13th prince has really betrayed us, then the number one pavilion in the world will be completely exposed to the Sky Devil royal family." The other two kings were silent. It was too difficult to decide. On one hand, there was an opportunity. On the other hand, there was a risk. There was a 50% chance. If they made the wrong choice, they would have no chance to turn things around. "Pavilion Master, I'll go personally," the woman said calmly. "The West King's worries are not without reason. Before I make a decision, I'll test it one more time." You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.